Hey everybody, it's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Welcome to the Hang Up. What's my hang up today? Well, actually, I'm just going to be honest. I don't actually have a hang up today. I know that like week after week, I come in with some thought on my head. I'm a little bit hung up on a couple of science questions. I got sick and I'm recovering. Like I did a show yesterday and did not cough all the way through it, which was like the first time in 4 days or so that I've gone without coughing. So I appreciate everybody's patience. And there's been a lot going on. We're still, in a pandemic, and there's new news about that. We're still dealing with, health. There's monkeypox and there's SCOTUS leaks and Roe's going to get overturned. And I'm fighting health insurance stuff and tax stuff and arguing with organizations on internal issues where it's just stuff that it's exhausting. And I worry sometimes that there's so much going on, and there's been so much going on for so long that everyone is just overloaded, and it makes people perhaps less interested in doing activism, or less interested in working on the changes that they've been working on because it feels kind of futile. I know people, in particular, people, on women's issues and trans issues and things like that are like, why on earth should I keep trying to work on activism issues? And after last week where we talked about gun related issues, I didn't have an ending. I'm still thinking. And the only thing I can say is that I'm not giving up and I'm not throwing in the towel. And so this week, my guest is, of course, Forrest Valkai. You know that before you even tuned in, because we had it up there. He was supposed to be on a couple weeks ago, and then I got sick, and then he had other stuff to do. And so, Forrest, get on in here and save me from just rambling nonsense at these people. How are you?
I'm awesome, man. You finally dragged me back in.
That's it. I have questions for you, sir. As a science educator extraordinaire, one of the biggest things that I deal with that we don't seem to talk about too much is we live in an age where we have a bit more access to more information and better information than ever in the history of the planet. And we also, I think, have failed systematically to teach people and give them the tools they need to really know how to go through this glut of information. When you're talking to people, when you're trying to counter bad ideas, even when you're talking to your students, where do you direct them? Like here's an entire internet. How do we know which sources are reliable? How do we know where we should invest our time so that we're not just running around going, ooh, I saw this thing that says, rubbing cow feces on the inside of your lip will cure your syphilis. I mean, how do we make sure that people get the tools to get the right answers more often than not?
It's funny you say that, because literally right before this, I was watching something, or somebody was talking about is COVID sexually transmissible? So like, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the simple fact of the matter is, the cool thing about the internet and the cool thing about the proliferation of social media platforms like, TikTok and Instagram and all these things is that we're able to share more ideas faster, and we're able to get information out to people faster, and everybody can learn and everybody can access the whole wealth of human knowledge at any time. But then the downside to that is that any idiot can put anything they want out there and make it sound really good. Yeah. And so like a lot of times the issue is, I always direct people. The first thing when I want to know something, the first place I go is Google Scholar. And I just look in there to see if there's any, scientific research on this particular thing. But even Google Scholar occasionally is going to have just like any random publication from anywhere. So you need to know what this actually looks like. Is this just an abstract, just an idea, or is this actually a properly published paper? I remember when I was in, my first biology degree, and we had a class where we were just doing review of scientific papers. And I thought I knew how to read one at that time. I thought I was pretty smart. And then the professor was like, all right, cool. So now that's what they found. Do you think they're right? And I was like, but it says so in the paper. That means it's right? And like, yeah, but does the materials and methods section actually make sense? Why is there graph of counting lizards in like half? What's half a lizard, And so a lot of people don't have access to the ability to question themselves this way and to question authority this way and what that actually looks like. So I always tell people it's not just about if you can find a scientist that says a thing. I guarantee you I can find a scientist that says COVID isn't real. I can find a scientist that says the earth is flat. I can find a scientist that says evolution doesn't work. I can find a scientist that says any dumb thing. Doesn't make him a good scientist. Doesn't make him a smart scientist. It's about consensus, and it's about finding out what the majority of scientists say and what the bulk, the overwhelming preponderance of the evidence points us to.
Now, you are actually teaching students in what grade or grades?
I mainly teach high school, but like I'm an informal educator, so schools and colleges and libraries and whatnot hire me to come out and do stuff. But I do get contracted to work with individual groups on a regular basis, and that's mainly high school.
What is from somebody who's actually doing stuff with high schools? What's your confidence level that the students you wind up interacting with, and this has nothing to do with how good you are at teaching or coming up. How many of them are walking away? What percentage of them do we think are walking away with a better understanding, or let's say a sufficient understanding of scientific methods and both what's going on and how to get the answers that they're looking for? Because I see so many people who just seem incredibly frustrated, who their view of science is that you can't trust science because science just keeps changing its mind about something. We learn something and then we find out it's wrong, and then we got to learn the new something. And if we're, do we have reason to be optimistic that we're doing a better job teaching than like when I went to school?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, what you just talked about there about how, a science is always changing. That's the best part about science. We fact check ourselves and we go back and retest things and we prove ourselves wrong. One of my favorite lessons that I always try to start with when we talk about the scientific method is about what a hypothesis is and how like hypotheses move forward. So like you don't disprove a hypothesis. You don't reject a hypothesis. You don't prove a hypothesis. You don't accept a hypothesis. You do reject. Pardon me. I misspoke. I was trying to say the next thing first. The key is what you actually do with a hypothesis is you fail to reject it. That's what happens. You can reject and dismiss hypotheses all day long. You never accept it. You never prove it. You just fail to reject it. When you get to a point where you can no longer prove yourself wrong, you just go with that until you can prove yourself wrong later, and then you're more right. And so the fact that science changes and the fact that we're always, proving ourselves wrong, and we're always trying to fact check ourselves and critique ourselves are the reason why we have literally everything around us. They're the reason for modern medicine. There's a reason why you, when you got sick, didn't go to a doctor and have most of your blood drained out of your body to balance your humors, because we learned that makes no sense after a little while. So you want science to change. Right? You don't want your airplane powered by prayers and chanting and sacrifice. You want it powered by physics, by aerodynamics, right? So this is the point of science. And as far as my confidence with children, generally, I mean this sincerely with my whole heart. I have so much more confidence in the high schoolers that I talk to than a lot of the adults that I talk to. Because adults, I find, are very set in their ways, and they're very used to being right, and they're not comfortable with change. And they've been taught that if they heard it from somebody who has has some sort of authority, or they heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody, then it must be true. And you can't possibly put something on an image on the internet unless it's verified, so that must be accurate too. Whereas with children, they know their way around the internet a little bit better. They know what it is to change their minds a whole bunch. They're currently in a phase of questioning themselves.
Sure.
They're a lot more open to change. They're a lot more open to other opinions. And they actually have a really, really, really good habit of asking why. And that's the best part about teaching, man. If you've never been stumped by a class full of third graders because they won't stop asking why, you haven't enjoyed the wonders of teaching. That's what kids are great at. And so they're great at asking, well, how do you know that? Well, how do I know that? Well, how can you prove that? Well, adults are just like, oh, well, this guy with the lab coat said it. It must be true. High schoolers are awesome, man. I have much more confidence in them than anybody else.
I stumbled across, like you, I spend probably way too much time on TikTok. I posted I posted one video like a week or so ago that actually took off a little bit and got like a couple 100,000 views, but most of the rest of them are maybe 20,000. I posted two of them in the last 24 hours just to kind of see what happens. But I stumbled across something on TikTok which made me happy because it sent me to YouTube to watch the full version. And the actual YouTube channel is the Imperial College London, but the videos that are there are the ones that I'm talking about right now are incredibly old. The handful that I watched this week, there's one called Magnetic River from 1975, where Professor Eric Lathwaite goes through and talks about magnetic coils and linear motors and how aluminum reacts differently to this and how you can use this to make shuttles. And then he has this like an incredibly intuitive, obvious mechanical tool with just a bunch of rods on it, and the rods are moving up and down. Even they're only moving up and down, but because they're moving up and down in rhythm, it looks like there's a sine wave moving across. And so he goes through to describe that even though none of the individual bars are moving, the appearance of motion is there. But then he takes a ping pong ball and basically puts it in the trough of those, and the ping pong ball actually physically moves in a given direction, even though there's no directional movement that way from the individual bars. And I don't know. I remember growing up with this type of stuff. I remember seeing it on PBS. I remember it came into the classroom. I remember great experiments and demonstrations and all this. Does stuff like that happen? Because when I watched that video from 1975, and it's 18 minutes and 38 seconds long. And despite the fact that I was reasonably decently educated, I was in the United States Navy as an electronics technician in the nuclear power program. So it's not like magnetism, electricity, and other things are foreign to me. And yet I felt like watching that 18-minute video, I learned more about magnetism, electricity, and locomotion in that time than I had in my entire life. Are we still doing a good job like that? Am I just being nostalgic, or do we need to get back to that? Am I just not in school, so I don't know?
I mean, it's hard because like it really depends on what the school can afford to do. We base school funding on property income property taxes, and so like that's a great way to make sure that poor kids will get a poor education and remain poor, and rich kids will get a good education and remain rich. So it's difficult to say what the school is able to accomplish and if they're just going to put videos on like that or if they're actually going to work with the kids. I worked for a little while as a STEM educator for a science museum, and I did outreach programs going out into the schools and working with kids. And we started doing, we would poll people afterwards of all the various lessons that we did. And we found that in terms of retention and enjoyment, kids freaking loved it when they got to work with their hands and do something themselves. And they especially loved it when they got to take something home, because then they would remember later, they'd pick it up the next day. But, oh yeah, that's right, I learned about this thing. And so like, talking about electricity and magnetism and whatnot, I can sit here and talk to you about Lorentz forces or whatever. I can talk to you about that, and I can talk to you about all these crazy interactions between electricity and magnetism. I can talk about how electromagnetism is two sides of the same. I can talk about the old Faraday experiments. But at a certain point, you're going to get bored. A demonstration is really cool. And if I can put that demonstration in your hand and have you build a homopolar motor with a piece of wire and a magnet and some and a battery and get that thing spinning, you're going to love that for the rest of your life. You're going to remember the time that you felt like you were a freaking wizard building this little motor. So like that's the key, putting it in kids' hands and having them experiment with it and tinker on it themselves. Because it's not just the knowledge that's important. It's the process. It's the discovery. It's the exploration of it. It's the play. Like the playing is so important for learning. And so as far as like whether things like that happen in schools today, that depends on how much the school can afford. And it's why we need to increase education funding universally. It's really important.
Absolutely. We're going to get to calls real soon here. I want to show you something because I don't have any kids. And so I am my own kid, and which means I get all the toys, which means this house is not only filled with all of my magic collectibles and guitar stuff and oddities, like here's a baby octopus in a jar type thing, But also, if I come across anything that's neat science-wise, I grabbed a Galton board, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but I'm going to use it for a couple of different videos. And what it is, for those who aren't familiar, I've got this here. And if it's sitting down and you tip this, the balls drop and it shows that they fall. Well, let me get the reflection out of the way. They're going to fall in basically a standard distribution. You get that off of
It's always nice when the balls drop.
Yeah. And so they're not always going to fall the same, but they're going to, they're going to normatively move towards this standard distribution. Now, I'm going to, despite the fact that these things aren't actually magnetic, I'm going to use this and make it consistently fall in a distribution that does not match that curve in a video in order to talk about some stuff. But it's this cool thing where just this little piece of plastic, you tip it over and it's not the same every time. And yet it's the same every time. The average, normal standard distribution shows up. It is so much fun to just sit there and watch that and actually think about it.
And that's such an important concept. And you said it perfectly. It's not the same every time, but it's the same every time. That's something that like so many kids and adults as well struggle to grasp about science, especially in biology. I love biology so much. I became a biologist because it's so fucking weird, and like nature makes all of its rules and breaks all of its own rules all the time. And so when we talk about things like, for example, species, a species isn't a real thing. It's just a categorization that we made up. And there's a dozen different ways that we classify what a species actually is, and not a single one of them works all the time. And so when we say, this species of whatever frog or something does these things and looks these ways, that's the textbook example, and you better freaking believe there's 10 million cases where that doesn't work, where that isn't the case, where this species does different stuff, where it behaves in different ways, where it looks different ways. There's always going to be that variability. And so if you come to me and say, no, that's not this because it has to be this way and it has to act this way and it has to do these things, it doesn't work. And we see that a lot. You brought up at the very beginning. We talk about trans rights, when we talk about race, when we talk about anything else about human populations. And people say, no, humans are very simple and they're very basic and they do these things and they're either in this box or this box or this box. And no, they're delightfully weird. And that's the best part about them. And how boring to eat the same food every day and to watch the same movie every day and to play the same video game every day. How boring to have just this one kind of human and this one kind of human. The wonderful thing about biology is that it is traceable. It's predictable a little bit. It's the same thing, but it's very much not ever the same thing. And it's always strange and it's always different. Oh, I could go on a million examples of that. I'm not going to. I'm just getting real excitable.
Because we've tried so hard to make things understandable, one of the things that we do constantly is we create boxes to put stuff in, because it's much easier to understand things if they're all in their appropriate boxes. And we need to spend, I think, considerably more time letting people know that these boxes aren't real. They are tools for us to understand. And so while we can talk about species and we could define species and we could have a number of different definitions that deal with species and speciation, it's not like the universe has a species bucket that we are using. This is a bucket that we're going to draw these lines. By the way, somebody in chat got excited when I talked about magic because I thought I was talking about Magic the Gathering. Tons of that as well, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, that's something that I try to teach people all the time, is if you want to learn biology, it's really important to learn to think in these categories and to learn to box things up. But if you really want to understand biology, you need to quit doing that shit. And you need to learn about the wiggly weirdness of every single thing. Nothing in biology. So we got 4 callers.
We got 4 callers and we may get more. But I want to start taking calls now because there's questions. Questions for me, questions for you, questions for both of us. But Nick, pronouns are he, him in California, wants to talk a little bit about woo kind of spirituality. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, Nick.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the woo spirituality because a couple decades ago, I don't like my early 20s and 30s, I had a lot of experiences you'd consider psychic experiences. And I found myself around a lot of affirming people, if you'd say, that encourage this type of thing. And that went on for a couple decades. Anyway, I'm afraid I'm one of those idiots you were talking about earlier. I wrote a book on my experiences. It was published. And, you know, I don't know. I've been thinking that I don't really have any physical evidence that this stuff is happening. I mean, I can't deny the experiences that I've had, but I just, from a lot of the stuff that I've been learning on the different line shows and things like that, and looking at those experiences that I have objectively, I don't think that I could rightly claim that these are, I don't know, spiritual experiences that I'm having, or that I thought I was having. So I guess I'm confused. And if I could just get my feet on the ground and really think about it in an objective way, just to know what, you know, what's real, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
So I'm wondering,
Yeah, man.
Can you give us, let's pick a spot. Now, first of all, we may not have answers. Plenty of times throughout the years, people have called in and said, "Oh, I had this experience. Can you give me an explanation for it?" And my answer is no. And other people will be like, "Oh, I had this experience, and can you prove that it's not, magical and supernatural?" No, that's not the point. In order to believe that it is, I would need evidence that it is. So why don't you give us a concrete example of your understanding of an experience you had that would have in the past led you to support kind of more woo-based beliefs, and see what Forrest and I think about it.
Yeah.
Sure. I used to work with dead people, and I would get these.
Were you like a
It would
mortician?
sound like these, something like that. Yes, dead people, and
Okay,
I would get what.
Go ahead. It's weird to be cagey about. I used to work with dead people. It's a weird sentence to say, and then not. But go ahead.
I was going to let it go, but yeah, no, I also used to work with dead people. I've been there.
Okay, recently dead people who have just died. It's
There were
a job.
cadavers that I dissect a lot.
Yeah, they're a little bit more fresh than that.
Cool.
So
cool.
It's a job that I. Go ahead.
No, you keep on. You're good.
No, I was just trying to find common ground with you. That's all. Yeah. By all means, tell me more about the dead people.
So I would get what would sound like voices from these people and saying things about right before they died, and then right after, when I would be with them. And I didn't really believe this kind of stuff in the beginning. I would just say, wow, that's really weird. That's coincidental. These things that I was thinking that I heard or felt at the autopsy then would be, some of it would be kind of confirmed. Others of it you can't confirm. And I would say, wow, that's a weird coincidence or whatever. This happened a few times. But then there were some other things that had happened in different contexts. And, after a couple of decades around being around very affirming people, and actually I would go to classes to try and quote unquote develop this psychic ability that I have, I started to really buy into it and believe it. And like I said, when I wrote this book about my experiences and things like that. And but now I'm, well, not now, but within the past couple of years, I've been having some real doubts as to whether that is just coincidental or just things I'm picking up from the environment or the things they were wearing. I guess they call that like mentalism. So, I've been reading a lot about mentalism too. So.
Yeah. So a question for you. You said we were like training these abilities. Did you have people that were working with you, teaching you how to do this more?
Yes. After a while, when I started
what was their success rate? Like, why did they have the qualification to teach you how to do these tricks?
Just that they were further along the road and had developed their abilities and had students. And, you know, I mean, I've seen things online like the teal swan type of thing, and I'm just like, you know, this is kind of bullshit. And it just makes me think that all that time was just bullshit for me.
Well, it sounds to me like you had some interesting experiences and that maybe you were predisposed to believing in more things. There's a fly on my microphone. It's driving me crazy. You were maybe predisposed to believe some of these things, maybe because the environment you were in, the people you were around, maybe whatever kind of mythology you grew up with that was influential to you, who knows? And then a bunch of people who also couldn't do these things, but said that they could do these things and you know, bought you know, fancy clothes or colorful lights or whatever credentials online they needed to be able to tell you that they could do these things, whatever it may be, continue to reassure you and confirm to you. And so you got trapped in a little bubble of confirmation bias where you would feel something, thought you heard something, maybe you heard something else that you attributed to what you wanted it to be, who knows, and that validated what you were believing. And then you went to these people who also validated what you said you were believing. Did you pay these people to teach you?
Unfortunately, I did.
So they had a really good reason to validate what you said you were hearing and thinking and all these things as well. And then they probably, if I'm guessing right, they probably gave you new tools, either physical or mental or emotional tools to go try out, to go see if you get better results. And because the people who you figured were further along on their journey, as you put it, said it, you tried it, and then it worked. And so you came back to them and said, oh my God, it worked. And they said, I know it worked. That's why I told you to do it. Give me more money. And so you got caught in this sort of psychedelic loop of you know, hearing dead people. Is that about what you're saying?
That's about right. And you said something, you said confirmation bias. And I think, I think that really hit hard for me because, you know, you're right. I've read a lot also about confirmation bias and in different contexts, but it absolutely does work in this context. And you're right. It's probably just a confirmation bias that I was looking for and that other people were looking for in me. And we just kind of put ourselves in an echo chamber of confirmation.
Yeah. And so like what you did here, and like you started the call by saying that you were an idiot because you put out a book. I don't think you're an idiot at all. I think what happened was you fell victim to the absolute easiest, most common mistake that everybody makes. And I used to be, you know, some sort of weird spiritual when I was a kid. I had the exact same thing. I was raised to believe, I was taught by my family that I could channel my energy through my hands and cure sickness and like make people feel better and whatnot. And so when I tried and I felt a little tingling in my fingers because I expected to, and then the person expected it to work and said, wow, that feels great, then I knew that I was magic. And then all the times that it didn't work and all the times that I didn't feel anything and all the times that the person was like, what are you doing, you weirdo? Quit pointing your fingers at me. then I didn't care. And then I ignored that. And when I went to the psychic conventions around Tulsa and the person with the biggest crystals told me, oh, I can see your aura. Yes, you really, I was like, wow, this person has the biggest crystal in the room and they can tell that I'm special. So I must be special. You did the exact same thing that every single person has done about something or other in their life, especially when they're raised in spirituality or religion. So congratulations, you win the participation trophy of life. That's fine. And the fact that now you are questioning these beliefs and coming to ask, do I really have a good reason to believe these things, just shows that you're an intelligent thinking person and you're willing to do the hard work of questioning yourself. That's scary, difficult shit to do, man. And I congratulate you on doing it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
It's one of the things
I
where
should write an updated
cheating,
edition to my book.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you should.
Even without any cheating, you could sit down and say, like, I could, and we've done this, like, I haven't done it, but I mean, we as humans have done this sort of experiment type thing before. If I sit down with a 6-sided die and I'm sitting across from someone and I'm going to put up a little shield and I'm going to roll that die and they're going to tell me what they think I rolled. If they get, I'm going to show them no matter what it is. But if we start changing things like, oh, you got it wrong. So now when you focus on this, I want you to, hang on to your left ear. Oh, that didn't work. All right. We're looking for your particular, energy focus that will allow you to get it right. And then eventually you'll be, touching something. I'm going to touch my pinky and boom, you think I rolled a 5 and I rolled a 5. Cool. Now I want you to try to make me roll a 5 again. And we keep, now we've changed the parameter of the experiment. Whereas instead of trying to figure out what I've rolled, now you're trying to influence it. And so if I don't roll a 5, then it can be, okay, that didn't work. We need to, let's focus, maybe get rid of some of the noise in the room, keep going. And eventually I'm going to fucking roll a 5. And you're going to be sitting there holding your pinky and you got me to roll a 5. And we're going to be like, okay, whatever you were feeling right then, I want you to try to feel that same thing again. And when it doesn't work, it's like, now you're not quite getting in the zone. And eventually I'm going to roll 5 twice in a row. And whatever you're doing at that point, you're going to be convinced is what makes this work, because you're doing a bunch of different things. You're using the fallacy of small sample sizes. You are at every point changing the nature of the experiment, not just so that you can, emphasize the hits and ignore the misses, but fundamentally change the nature of the experiment. And this type of mistake happens even when knowledgeable, scientific-minded people are setting up test protocols. It is going to happen with shocking regularity when the average person sits around with their Ouija board or their crystal or their their pendulum or their runes or the tea leaves that they're reading. It's this self-reinforcing bit of deception, except there's multiple people involved sometimes.
Yeah, it's just like what you had at the beginning, that standard distribution thing. It's always the same, except it's always a little bit different too. And so if I flip a coin 10 times, it might come up tails 6-7 times in a row. Oh my gosh, how spooky. But eventually it will balance out to 50-50.
Yep. So the big thing, Nick,
thank you guys.
Keep asking questions.
Okay. I appreciate you taking the time to bring a little realism to the conversation. I appreciate that.
I think that if I ran across anybody who thought they could do something that is not already to be a confirmed human capability, confirmed by scientific consensus, anybody who thinks they can do anything like that, one thing to realize is that, is it more likely that you have been deceived or are deceiving yourself than what you claim is actually true? And to use, Hume's razor, essentially reject the greater miracle. Hume does not say accept the lesser miracle. Hume says reject the greater miracle. And so if the options are, I really am talking with the dead, or I have fallen prey to some mistake that makes me think I'm talking with the dead, we're going to reject the greater miracle right off the bat and say, yeah, it's less likely that you have actually spoken with the dead. By the way, it's anybody can talk to the dead. It's getting the dead to talk back that's the impressive part.
Yes. Well, this won't be the first time I'm subject to human deception, self-deception.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not for any of us, man.
I appreciate it. Keep asking questions. And yeah, if you ever think that you have some ability or that somebody's trying to convince you have an ability, there's no reason to ever fear testing that claim. The truth has nothing to fear from investigation and inquiry. That's the nice thing, is that if you can do what you think you can do, it's not really possible for me to, I remember when James Randi and I were talking about this, and the number of times that he tested people with claims, and the thing that he kept going on about was that these people, even after it's been clearly demonstrated that they can't do what they say they can do, sometimes they believe it more strongly because there's this investment. There's this, hey, I've publicly said, I've written a book or whatever. I've claimed I can do this. And when testing them, when they would fail, quite often they would come up with this ad hoc justification saying, well, the truth is that Randy is an actual wizard who's using his psychic abilities to block them from being able to do this. And so people would be like, hey, I can really do this, but he's more powerful than me, so he's keeping me from doing it in order to save face. But
well, the truth be told, I would like to live in that world. I would like to live in a world of wizards and psychic abilities, but I really don't think I do. And that's the truth of it. And you're right. I mean, truth has nothing to hide, and I just don't think I do.
Yep. Well, if you ever have good reason to think that you do live in that world, by all means, share it, and let's get to testing, and let's get us all a Nobel Prize. We live in a world with wizards and psychics.
I'll call you back as soon as I have evidence. I will call you back.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Take care.
Sorry I had to jump up there for a second. I don't know if you saw, but there's a fly flying around this room, and it was hanging on my microphone, and then it was on my face, and it was on the camera. So I just had to go turn the air conditioning up a little bit. Hopefully they'll cool it down and make him fuck off.
Put that fly in a box. Cool. We got, I think David's got a couple super chats for us to do, and then we'll get on to more calls.
Sweet.
At Matt, wishing you and Arden well, living in a place like Texas. I'm so tired of all the transphobia. It feels worse than 20 years ago when I first transitioned. I'm 43 years old now. Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. It's difficult, and it's been especially hard on Arden from time to time, but we're pretty good about taking breaks and getting away from stuff to where it doesn't feel like you're dealing with all of it all day, every day. Because nothing's going to drive someone away from activism faster than feeling like not only are you just constantly treading water, but you're actually losing progress. And right now, things definitely feel like that. But
it is interesting to see how much hate has become fashionable lately. And I feel like I'm sure it always has been there, but I feel like especially nowadays it's become more and more. We have this, the whole fuck your feelings crowd coming through. It's real rough. I feel like more people are taking up the occupation of internet troll as their day-to-day life.
Yeah, and it's when I talked about earlier, how do we figure out which sources to trust and depend on and things like that? And we're not going to have a great answer. I no longer can enjoy things like The Onion or Babylon Bee or these satirical sites because even when they're better about labeling, this is satire. People don't see it. People don't fully grok what's going on. And then you end up spreading bad information around. And while, it should be fun. Like I remember when the Onion first started publishing stuff, and like every now and then something would get you, and you'd be like, "Hang on, that can't be true? That can't be true." And then the rest of them you would just laugh at. But there's a contingent of the population that looks at all of it and does not have this "hang on, is that true?" kind of line of questioning. It's, oh, I read it in something that looks official. Somebody in a lab coat is saying something. They are the expert. And it's hardly surprising that we have essentially bred distrust in reliable sources. And we've bred this notion of, oh, it's all fake news, because there was a lot of fake news. There was a lot of satire. Yeah. There was a lot of uninformed opinions. There was a lot of, hey, the internet is the great equalizer. And it means that me, you, Kent Hovind, and Richard Dawkins could all put up a video, and we are, apart from algorithms of whose face is going to get stuck in front of first, we're all on equal footing from the standpoint of we could buy the same cameras, the same microphones, have the same type of production. It could look just as good as the nightly news. In the old days, I'm dating myself a little bit, the conspiracy theorist rags were like self-published things that looked like they were ransom notes, cut out here and jaggedy. And it was the newspapers looked professional, and Time magazine and People magazine and all this was professional, and the rest was, Weekly World News type crap. Well, now everybody and everything can look professional and look like it's coming from a reliable place, even if it's not. But
and that's what sucks, is because I really do think that decentralizing news sources is really important. Getting it out there is really important. Allowing everybody to speak and have that availability, so that it isn't, this, one corporation owns every news organization and they're the only ones that can look good and sound good and all that. I think that's a good thing. But the evil that comes along with it, like you said, is that people can't tell the difference anymore. And I remember when the Onion was very obviously fake, and then during the Trump era, we had so many real news stories that sounded like Onion articles, and so many Onion articles that sounded like real news stories as a result. And now, we're in a day and age where we're no longer arguing about ideas anymore. We're arguing about ideals, and that hurts. Yeah. It feels really shitty.
121 Mexican from Manzon Gomez. Matt, do you have actual friends who are Christian and both tolerate each other and hang despite you being such an outspoken atheist? The technical answer is yes, but the most honest answer is probably not. While I am friends with people who are religious, we keep our friendships kind of, hey, we're not going to talk about this. We like each other for other reasons in other ways. I am not particularly close with very many Christians at all right now. And it's not because I ended relationships. It's because a good chunk of them ended the relationship, but I have ended some. So it's, I'm not just going to blame them. Thanks, Anton. $10 from Hippocrates. Thanks to both of you for all you do. You're very welcome. Thank you for your kind donation. And 10 from Omega. I really need to address a couple of important topics. Please allow me to call in tonight. Okay. If you're not on hold already, David, get ready and see if we can't screen a call from Omega. And if we got, let's do one more of the super chats and then I'll go to another call. $9.99 from Lane Harrison. Thank you, Lane. Much appreciated. Okay, so there's two that have no message. Well, Lane, it looks like you sent the money twice, both times with no message. I don't know if something was going wrong, if we need to refund one of them, or, oh, you got a message here. What do you think about the idea that we're training the next school shooters as they're participating in active shooter drills?
So they know where to look.
I don't think that counts as training the next school shooters any more than training firefighters how to fight fires is training the next set of arsonists. You might be. There's nothing you can do about the fact that the information is out there. Somebody wants to find out how to modify a weapon, get a bomb. Somebody wants to find out what police procedures are. All of this information is publicly available, and is probably going to err on the side of being better that the public knows about it than not. This fantasy that we can hide information, and that this protects us is a lie. It's a lie I discovered working in software for many years, where it's like, hey, if we don't tell people about this exploit we know about, they're not going to find it. Yes, they are. They're going to find every exploit that you know about and all the ones that you don't know about, if you have a big enough fan base working on it. And similarly, if the issue is, hey, we're training the next set of school shooters by having them participate in active shooter drills, well, okay, what's the consequence of not having active shooter drills? Don't we just leave all the kids and the teachers unprepared for this? And now you don't need to train, your school shooters. So yeah, I'm not worried about
it. Sounds a lot like abstinence only education. If we don't teach the kids about sex, they won't have it. Yeah, they will. And like I'm a biologist. I study humans. I know very, very, very well how to hurt a person. I know more ways to do it than most people do because I know how our bodies work. But that's better for me to know than not. Yep.
All right, we're going to take some more calls here. We've got, we'll see how this goes. I've got Mark in Florida wants to ask me about why I voted for Joe. So welcome, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Forrest. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, you use your platform to come on here sometimes and bash Republicans like they are responsible for all of our country's problems. And that's okay if that's what you really think. But I did want to ask you, why you did vote for the guy who is currently in office right now.
Because he wasn't Trump. That was the only other alternative, and Trump is the least honest, least intelligent, least compatible with my values. He was worse on science, leadership, LGBTQ issues, had less experience and understanding of government, military, and diplomatic issues, applauded fascist dictators, inspired an insurrection, led to 8 million more Americans being poor, increasing the poverty rate to 11.7%. His only primary victory was tax cuts, the smallest growth in economic output over the 12 presidents that came prior to him. The rich got richer, but the gains that we made went to the wealthy and the corporations, has done nothing for climate change issues, pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, and didn't really do that much to improve healthcare. But is everything that Trump ever did wrong? No, but also stacking the Supreme Court so that we're going to have Roe v. Wade overturned. Those are the many, many, many reasons of many more that I voted for Biden instead of Trump.
Okay. But in the first year and a half that he's been in office, he also put millions of Americans out of work, as evidenced by the Keystone XL pipeline. He signed 40 executive orders around that number by his ninth day in office.
I'm sorry, Mark.
But
if you're just going to list things that don't in any way counter what I just said, what's the point? Do you have something that did something I say? No, they're not countering. Did something that I say, is one of my reasons incorrect, and is something you're going to say going to counter one of my reasons?
Yes, it will.
Cool. Okay. What is it? Which of my, first name the reason that I gave you that was incorrect.
You went through them so fast, I had trouble keeping up, but I want to.
That's not my problem. You just said, no. You just said that you're going to counter one of mine, and now you're saying you don't know what they are, which means you're lying. And in the meantime, I gave you my reasons for why I voted for Biden, and I don't care to discuss it anymore. Cool?
Seems like you voted out of emotion, okay, with your heart instead of your head. I mean, you disliked Trump so much that it was more important for you to vote against what's in the best interest of America and vote for
I'm
a
sorry,
guy
but
who's
I'm
almost
sorry,
50
Mark,
no,
years
but
old,
no.
serious
so here, now
cognitive-
your ass is on mute. Now your ass is on mute, which means nobody's going to hear you. And when I'm done yelling at you in a nice, calm tone, I'm going to hang up on you without having you say another word. And the reason for that is I gave you a laundry list of reasons, and your response is, seems that you voted with your heart and you didn't do what was in America's best interest. Well, I did vote with my heart and my head, and I voted in what I think is America's best interest. I'd rather not have a con artist, liar in chief who is anti-LGBTQ, anti-climate change improvements, and anti so many other things. And if that's my heart voting, cool. I don't give a fuck about your opinion, Mark. I didn't call you and ask you for your opinion. But if you thought you were going to come in here and counter one of my reasons, maybe you should have listened and at least jotted down the one that you thought was wrong instead of wasting whatever time you had on the show, because now you're gone.
It's
How
super
about we do
frustrating because like
super
every
chat,
time,
David?
sure, it's super frustrating because every time I talk about why I didn't vote for Trump, everyone's, oh, it's Biden did this and this and this and this. Right, I get it. I don't like Biden either. I also agree that Biden sucks. But also, I would have literally voted for the ass end of a half-boiled ferret over Trump. So, like, we're in the same exact situation. Literally anybody else was better for America, so that's what I went with. It sucks that this is the best we could do. The fact that Biden's the best we got is horrific, but he is the best we had, so, like, we went with it.
Yeah. I was not a Biden fan. I wasn't supporting Biden in the early primaries at all.
I'm still not.
I used to be a Biden fan.
I'm disappointed regularly.
Yeah. The fact that Biden hasn't magically fixed absolutely everything doesn't mean that there hasn't been improvement. And when Texans went after trans kids, the Biden administration not only made a statement, but began enacting or instructing the relevant committees to take some action. Trans people couldn't serve openly in the military because Trump reversed some of Obama's stuff. And now we've fixed that stuff. Have we fixed everything? No, there's a lot to fix because we had 4 years of the most fucked up fuck up that's ever fucked up the presidency. So if the worst you can say is, I think you voted with your heart, Matt, thank you. I wish you fucking had one, you disgusting troll. Or, whatever. All right, super chats.
Sucks, dude.
And then we'll get back to calls.
Super chats.
I'm working David. 99 for length. What do you think about that? Oh, we did that one, the school shooter.
We gotta get this guy.
$10 from JRO. Thought exercise. In 20 years, we've met dozens of intelligent extraterrestrial life. No, we haven't. Oh, you're saying if in 20 years, it is the case that we have met dozens of intelligent extraterrestrial life. Cool. None of them have a concept of religion, spirituality, etc. What happens next? I don't know.
You have to call Answers in Genesis and see how they'll square that circle among many others.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be addicted to anybody who's, sending in their hypotheticals, but this is a fanciful hypothetical that I don't think is within the realm of reasonable possibility. I don't think it's likely to happen. And I don't think that it's too valuable to spend much time, If
it means anything, I do personally know people who left their religion because the concept that aliens wouldn't know, would alien civilizations know who Jesus was, and the mathematical almost certainty that there is life out there somewhere, and then the absurdity of them knowing Jesus kind of helped lead them away. So, like, maybe that'd be cool. But like, I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I had preachers who addressed this issue of, is there life on other worlds? Matter of fact, we had a caller not too long ago that was saying there can't be life on other worlds because the Bible said that, men are only going to exist on Earth, except that the Bible doesn't say that. And that caller was a liar, which is why we get rid of them. But I've had preachers say that if there is life elsewhere, it never sinned because Jesus was sent to die once for mankind, or that there's some sort of multiversal thing where he died once for everybody everywhere in the universe, and this happened simultaneously on multiple planets and all this other stuff. I also think that, why on earth would we presume that they had no concept of religion or spirituality? I would be surprised if there was significantly intelligent life anywhere in the universe that didn't make mistakes in thinking that led to, beliefs that were false, and yet endearing parts of their culture. We've seen countless religions on Earth and plenty of superstitious woo stuff on Earth. I'd be like, if we actually ran across aliens and they had absolutely no woo bullshit beliefs,
that'd be tight.
I'd be more than a little suspicious.
It would just mean that they were more advanced than us. That's all.
It could very well. But I think that, the extreme believers, the Southern Baptists like I grew up with, would say that these aliens are demons and they are here to deceive us, and you have to stay in the Word and continue working towards, God's plan.
Those all sound like the things that they say.
Yeah.
It's the same demons who put the dinosaur bones in the ground.
Yeah. $20 from I got cookies, virtual cookies. Somebody asked me a hypothetical. Imagine we were visited by aliens. Yeah, we just answered this, and cookies already acknowledged it. But thanks for sending that in. Mm-hmm. What would that prove God since they're His creation too? So there's a slight difference to this question, which is the aliens show up and they have a Bible. I would want them to demonstrate where they got the Bible, because if I was going to go as an alien race and take over some other planet, and I saw that they had religious beliefs, the easiest way to manipulate them is to act as if I shared those religious beliefs. And if an alien can get from whatever planet they're on to here, to Earth, then they probably have the ability to sneak a Bible from Earth into their ship without us knowing. It's not hard to get a Bible. You literally stay in a hotel, you get one for free. So it wouldn't prove anything. They'd need to prove that their Bible originated on their planet. And then we would spend a decade going over what's the same and what's different. And it still wouldn't get us to, therefore it's true. It would be interesting, but I don't think it gets
we came here to figure out what the hell Israel is, because it talks about it a lot. We don't
know who this Moses guy was. He didn't exist on our planet, but we've had this book talking about what happened on your planet. We thought we'd come visit.
Like a bad sitcom.
Thank you, cookies. $50 New Zealand from Aaron Honey. Hi, darling and Baldrick. Did you know honey only comes in two thermodynamics phases, solid and liquid, but can be gas if I have baked beans? Nice. Good joke, honey. $20 Canadian. I always want to say $20 Californian, but $20 Canadian from 60-Second Skeptic. Quick question for you both. What's the worst movie you've ever watched, not counting Pure Flick stuff?
Oh, flip, dude. The last movie I walked out of was The Host. It was a long time ago. We wanted to go see it because it looked terrible, and it was so much worse than we anticipated. We literally couldn't stop laughing, so we had to leave the theater to be polite.
I know I've walked out of one movie, but I can't remember what it was. I do pretty good in that I can find something appealing and entertaining in most movies. And I care more about whether they're internally consistent. Is it going to break its own rules of the fantasy? I can jump into a fantasy world. I don't hang on to stuff. Like if it's bad, I don't need a reminder that it's bad. It's just like, you'd have to list what you think the worst movies, because I've never watched The Room, which I hear is universally accepted as the worst movie ever. Except that people enjoy watching it because it's bad. I've seen
never heard
Rocky.
of that one.
I've seen Rocky Horror Picture Show more times than the only movie that I know I've seen more times than Rocky Horror Picture Show is probably maybe Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because that was at the Dollar Theater when I was a kid, and we went like no, that would still just been once a weekend for a summer. I've seen Rocky Horror 200 times.
Jesus.
It's not a good movie, but I still like it. I wouldn't put it on my bad movie. But yeah,
I can tell you some bad TV shows.
Me as
Amber and I are trying to go through the whole Marvel universe all at once, and like every single Marvel thing is not a good thing. Inhumans and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Woof. God, they're pulling hen's teeth
parts of
through.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that I liked. I'll tell you this, Iron Fist was the shittiest of all the Marvel shows.
That was hard too.
And it almost ruined Defenders for me, because I hated I don't hate the person, but the actor who was playing Danny Rand, I did not think was right. I didn't like the writing of it. Iron Fist was bad.
The character sucked. The character was so obnoxious.
I watched the first episode of Ms. Marvel today and much preferred that to Iron Fist. Still, it's not going to be great. Now, in the Marvel movies, I would say the Hulk movie and Thor: The Dark World are the two worst of the Marvel movies. But I can still have fun with it.
We're trying to go through everything in chronological order. We're on Runaways right now, and I want to die. It's so bad.
Wait, what's Runaways?
It's another random little Marvel spin-off show about these teenagers who I guess apparently have powers, and it's the whole thing is a teen drama written, it seems like, by teenagers. It just, oh man, it's so edgy. It's so edgy and cringy and weird.
Yeah. All right, one more and then we'll get back to calls. $10 from Shady Vista. Hey, Matt, do you remember speaking in Little Rock around 2012? Our honor, I was there as well. Yeah, Reason in the Rock. I got a T-shirt from that one. It was my first Atheist conference I attended. I thank you for carrying on all this time. Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I still have my Reason in the Rock T-shirt. And I'll be happy to go back to Little Rock and hang out. It was a lot of fun. All right, here we go. We got Paul, pronouns are he, him, in Texas. Wants to talk to me about, a parasite analogy I'm evidently improperly using. So welcome, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Hi there, Matt. First.
We hear you. Welcome.
I've heard you on several occasions, liken being pregnant to being infected with a parasite. And I cringe every time I hear you say that, and I don't know if Forrest has the same reaction. So I'd be curious to hear from Forrest on this.
I'm sorry, but a fetus fits the technical definition of a parasite.
Can you name one medical textbook or one textbook on embryology or parasitology which describes a fetus in such a manner?
No, but that's more to do with how humans are describing it. Whether it fits in there. It could anywhere where we look up what parasite means, a fetus, maybe not entirely, but to some extent fits that definition. A parasite is an organism that lives in or on an organism. Here's the problem. Most definitions of parasite would say that where it's living on a host that is a different species. And so on that technical front, it's not. But what I've always said, to the extent, I don't even use this analogy that much, but that it is a parasitic relationship. And I don't care if it's in there curing cancer, it doesn't get to use somebody else's body without their consent. So whether somebody else thinks it counts as a parasitic relationship or not, really doesn't matter to me. It is one organism using another organism, and that needs consent. Otherwise, it's parasitic. It is using it at the other's expense.
Yeah, I've actually had to go through classes and labs in parasitology for my biology degrees, and like that's exactly what I would say is that technically, strictly speaking, when you're talking about symbiosis, it's different species, but like you can pick another one, anglerfish. with anglerfish, a female is this big awesome thing, and when the male decides to mate, he just bites onto the female's butt and dies, and just fuses to her and becomes like literally a living dangling testicle. That's the same organism experiencing what you could otherwise call a state of symbiosis. And so you could draw lines there and say, all right, so this is a commensalistic or a mutual or whatever. In this case, when we're talking about a fetus and a pregnancy, by every other part of the phrase, this is detrimental to one organism and beneficial to another. They are living off of the other, is what we would call an obligate parasite, meaning they have to be there. They can't survive any other way. It isn't a technical term. It isn't one. You're right. We wouldn't find that in any textbooks or anything like that.
Yep.
But to use the turn of phrase and to use this to describe something as parasitic, that's reasonable. I agree that it's harsh, but it is reasonable.
Can you possibly think, Forrest, of maybe a better example?
Like a better way to call that?
Yeah, I mean, just a better analogy other than essentially calling a fetus a parasite.
Well, I mean, I would be using
this is where I get annoyed. I don't spend any significant amount of time calling fetuses a parasite. I have described the relationship as parasitic, and I'm not doing it in a way to educate on science. But you seem really hung up on whether or not this is fair or fits into something else. Are you in agreement that fetuses necessarily live off of the person that they're attached to? Right? Is that controversial?
No, not at all. I don't disagree with that.
And if someone doesn't want to have a fetus living off of them, isn't that an unwanted parasitic relationship?
You could describe it that way if you wish. It's not the way I would describe it.
I do wish. Now, why are you not happy with it? You called in to call me out on this as if I'm doing something unjust or unscientific or unfair, and yet you just agreed with my position.
I agreed with a part of your position. I agree with your position on.
That's the whole of my. What part of my position do you not agree with?
Well, if I had to throw something else out there, this idea that a fetus needs to have some sort of consent to exist within, the mother's body, and
so your problem isn't whether or not I call it a fetus. Your problem is that you don't think pregnancy requires consent. So you're fine with forcing women to remain pregnant against their will.
I didn't say that, Matt.
You absolutely. If you say that you are opposed to the concept that consent is required, then you are standing in opposition to the cornerstone of individual sovereignty, which is I no longer consent to this thing being attached to me. And so if you don't think that consent is an issue, you are opposed.
I agree with you, Matt, that women have the right to control their own bodies. But my point that I'm making here with regard to consent is one of exactly how does a fetus go about obtaining said consent?
The same way anybody else would. It is the pregnant person's decision whether they consent to remaining pregnant, period. The fetus doesn't have to do something to get consent. The pregnant person gives their assent or does not give their assent. I don't know why this isn't even a question. This doesn't even make sense.
It's not like the fetus is going to come out and shake their hand and say, hello, my name is so-and-so. Could I please live inside your body? It's just, either you want it there or you don't. It's the same thing. If you really want to draw the same line and really dig into this parasitic thing, if I eat some bad sushi and I get a tapeworm, if I decide to leave it there and lose some weight, that's my choice to do so. The tapeworm doesn't have to introduce themselves to me. And the second I want to take medicine to get rid of it, that's my choice to do as well.
If I want to,
you really want to lean into the parasitic thing.
If I want to go up and pet a strange dog, the dog doesn't speak English. We're not having a meeting of the minds. I'm not going up to the dog saying, do you give your consent to pet me? And yet I can absolutely, unequivocally, undeniably get that dog's consent to pet me. for me to pet it. So let's not pretend like consent is some difficult thing that a fetus needs to work towards. It's either granted by the person who's pregnant or it's not.
I agree.
Well,
But
then
even-
how can you say that consent isn't an issue and go off on how does a fetus get consent if you ultimately agree with what I just said?
Well, it's very simple, Matt. It's more within a legal framework. I mean, if we are going to describe a fetus as a person that has rights, which it doesn't at this point in most contexts within the law, then consent is a legal concept, and a fetus has no means by which to obtain consent. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, you are no longer being an honest interlocutor, because I literally went through this, got you to agree, and then you're like, it's simple, Matt. Let's look at the legal framework. I don't think for a second you have the slightest clue about the legal framework, because the issue here is whether or not a pregnant person is consenting to remaining pregnant. It's not about whether or not the fetus has some duty or obligation to get consent. It is about what the pregnant person is allowed to do with their body. And it doesn't matter. Personhood is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether it's a fetus, a clump of cells, a person, someone in there writing poetry or curing cancer. It doesn't have the right to use someone else's body without their consent, and it never should.
Well, Matt, I guess we're just going to have to disagree on this. I don't think a fetus is capable of obtaining consent on its own volition.
Oh my God. Yeah. So literally we just went through this. And your answer to me now is you don't think a fetus is capable of obtaining consent. Are you an idiot? Did you not agree that it's not about a fetus obtaining consent, but about the pregnant person granting consent? Did you not agree to that just a couple minutes ago?
Sure.
Yeah. So how can you agree to that 2 minutes
your issue?
ago and then come back and say that you don't think the fetus can get consent? You're not thinking about this clearly, and you're not being honest in this discussion.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt. I will call back when Andrew's on the show, and he may have some other thoughts on the issue of consent in the legal framework.
When you're going to tell me when you're going to call back to my show?
Well, you're always free to reject my calls. I mean,
you bet your ass I am. Are you going to discuss this honestly? Because you think I'm letting you back on after you agree with me and then spin a disagreement out of nothing and do nothing to defend it. You're full. You're nuts. You cannot say that you understand that a fetus couldn't get consent, but it isn't required for a fetus to seek the consent. It is required for the pregnant person to grant that consent, and then turn around and say, well, I just don't think a fetus can legally get consent. You know how silly you sound right now? But don't tell me when you're going to call back to the show. You call back and you try harder, and maybe we'll have a discussion and maybe we won't. But right now, you're not being honest. I don't know what to do with that.
Well, I'll let you get on to other callers, Matt. Thanks for taking my call. I enjoy your show.
Sure.
Your show. And hopefully we'll get a chance to see Forrest on other shows as well.
Look around. He's on all of them. Didn't you?
Thanks,
so Forrest did Atheist Experience this weekend with Shannon Q. And man, you did Talk Heathen like week before that. You were on Hang Up before that. And maybe Sunday show.
All the things that I'm doing all these things instead of my actual job. I keep putting that off.
It's very frustrating to me to make a good argument or make an argument that describes my position, have someone agree with it, and then say they disagree with my position and spin something we've already rebutted. Oh, well, I'll call back when a lawyer's on. Well, go for it. Because no lawyer is going to change the truth of what I said or change what I think about what I said or change. Let's wait till a lawyer gets on here. Okay. It doesn't have rights. It's not a person. It does, even if you granted it right, it wouldn't have a right to use somebody else's womb without their consent, period. But, we can't get there.
That's what I was thinking. It's like if we want to get into the legal semantics of it, radical, it's not doing anything for the ethical argument, the moral argument.
We got 2 callers left. I'm going to do one more, and we'll take super chats in between. So sorry for throwing a wrench at David, but Matt is calling in. Pronouns are he, him. Wants to talk about how to talk to reasonable believers. So welcome, Matt.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Forrest. Real quick, I just want to thank both of you for the work you both do. You two have really inspired me and helped me to change my views whenever I was being unreasonable.
Thank you for watching.
So,
Thanks.
My sister is a Jehovah's Witness, and she's willing to talk about it sometimes. However, I saw that she's being really stubborn, and she never wants to admit when she's wrong about, well, any topic. And she will always back off, saying that I can't change her mind, and she can't change mine. That is really frustrating, you know. The reason why I even bother to talk about this is she has convinced my mom to join her religion. And I don't think I can just stand around while they're recruiting people. The thing that bothers me is that she has changed her views sometimes. She now accepts evolution. So that proves to me that she can change her mind. You two are certainly familiar this sort of mental blockage that some people show whenever they realize that we are questioning their beliefs. What I wanted to know is if any of you have any tips on how I can avoid getting to that point, how I can make them comfortable and not seem like I'm trying to rip their God out of them or something like that.
Yeah, I would say in general terms, if someone tells you you are not going to change my mind, you need to believe them and you need to not try, because it will be deeply frustrating and never work. However, if this is someone who's in your family and someone that matters to you, as clearly is the case here, my only advice would just be to, start and end the proposition with, hey, I love you and this matters to me because you matter to me and I see a problem here and I want to talk to you about it. You don't have to, obviously, but you have to go into this conversation knowing that I love you and I genuinely care about this. And like that, just having it framed that way may not make the conversation happen. It may not make the conversation any easier in the long run, but it will at least lay out the ground rules and set that framework. It's the same thing as if I'm having an argument with my fiance. We wouldn't have a big explosive fight, because if she does something that hurts me, I'm going to say, all right, I know that she loves me, so she wouldn't deliberately do something to hurt me. Maybe there's a misunderstanding here. And she's going to come into the argument and say, I love you. I wouldn't want to hurt you. I don't understand what I did wrong. And then we can talk about it from that standpoint, rather than how dare you, and well, how dare you think that and all these, you know what I mean? And so this argument ends up not being an argument. And so the same thing here with this, if you have this big disconnect between you and your sister, hey, I love you and I care about you and this scares me and I want to talk to you about it and I need you to not be hurt by me asking questions. And she says, hey, I love you and I care about you too, but this is very important to me and I need you not to hurt me by pushing too many buttons. All right, we now both understand that neither one of us wants this to end badly. Let's try to find as far as we can go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In fact, that's quite enlightening.
And in all other situations, as I said at the beginning, if someone tells you you're not going to change their mind, write them off immediately, because it's not going to go that well.
It's far more important to let them know, hey, if you are ever interested in discussing this, I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. I don't know what value there would be in it because you've said you're closed-minded. I literally got a letter from my parents telling me they are closed-minded on this issue. They will not discuss it further, and they don't plan to change their mind. They are closed-minded. So I don't go to my parents ever about religious stuff. It hasn't stopped my mom from bringing it up many times. And we get into arguments and discussions, but I don't have any reason to think that I'm likely to change their mind. And I am not a big fan of obvious exercises in futility. One other thing to remember, though, is that even if your sister were to change her mind, it may not be you who does it. It may be better that you have nothing to do with it. Um, one of the things is that you hear something once and it's weird. You hear it twice and you're like, hey, I've heard that before. You hear it 3 times and it's a pattern. And this applies not only to religious indoctrination, but it applies to something that we've called atheist normalcy, which is, for the longest time, I didn't think it was like, how would I have ever imagined somebody didn't believe in a God? Somebody didn't pray. That was just the reality of literally everybody around me. And so the first time you hear that there's somebody who doesn't believe, it's weird. And then the second time it's like, oh, I've heard that before. And then the third time it's like a pattern. It may be that the first time you talk to your sister about this, there's a huge roadblock up. And the second time it's a little bit more familiar or something else has transpired. And then the third time it may have more of an impact. It may also be the case that you planted a seed that you will never see born out, but somebody else might, because they might water it in a different way. There are people like, okay, I just had a conversation about abortion. I guarantee you, I am aware of this. I'm saying this just so that nobody thinks that I'm oblivious. If Forrest had the bulk of that conversation with the caller, I think things would have gone noticeably different. I have a way of doing things, and it is nope, it's no nonsense. Here's this. I'm not putting up with any more of this bullshit. I said this. If you want to go off on a tangent, here's my, you asked me why I didn't vote for Trump. Here's my reasons. And if you start talking about things that Biden did, you are arguing fallaciously, because that would at worst be an argument that Biden is just as bad or similarly bad. It doesn't change anything I said about the reasons why I voted for that. And likewise, if my position on abortion is that there's a parasitic relationship and that it wouldn't matter if it was a person, it doesn't get to use somebody else's body without their consent, saying you don't think a fetus is capable of getting consent isn't in any way a reply to it. And rather than smoothly, gently leading someone to that understanding every time, sometimes I'm just like, nope, fuck that, sticking a fork in it, I'm done. That means that I'm not always going to be the best person to change somebody's mind. I'm going to change a lot of people's mind, because the biggest minds that I change are the ones where somebody gets so irritated at me that they set out to prove me wrong and wind up finding out that I was right. And I'm okay with that being a method. I think love your sister, hang out with your sister, let your sister know you're willing to talk, let her know that you don't approve, and don't have a goal of changing someone. Have a goal of, engaging with them on their terms when they're ready. That's the best I got.
Yeah, that helped a lot. The reason that I think that's a valid question for me is that the population around here is quite religious, and I've literally seen a man going around the city just shouting that there's no way the man could have evolved from apes, and that's quite frightening, to be honest with you. And
sure,
I wouldn't want to say that I'm explosive, because I really am not. I just think that it's not normal for people to be that close-minded, like not even willing to have any discussion on the topic. I'm not even trying to change their views or anything like that. I'm just trying to see why they believe what they believe. And the response I most often get is just that people generally shut down.
Think about a big part of these beliefs, especially when we talk about. Yeah, but remember, a big part of these, if you've looked into a lot of Christian teachings, is that at the end times or whatever, more and more people will rise up against Christianity, and that the more you're challenged and the more people try to take this away from you, the more proof it is that this is true. Yeah, and so the more you say, hey, I think this is an issue, the more they're like, aha, see, and that means it's right. And so so you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there. And that's why that's baked into it, because it's very easy to get lost in the sauce whenever that's the point of it, is that the more people tell you you're wrong, the more you know you're right. That's a dangerous philosophy, and it's what is taught in these things deliberately.
Just out of curiosity.
So that guy going around and screaming about how
think-
how evolution doesn't make sense, that probably happened because he saw just how many science museums there are around, and just how many scientists there are, and how many the evolution unit at his local community college or something like that, and that was proof positive that now is the time to go and shake the rattle the windows and tell the world that this isn't right, because clearly so many people think it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think there's any denomination of Christianity or any other religion actually that is a bit more stubborn than any other? Like,
Sure.
in my opinion, what I've seen so far, it seems that the Jehovah's Witnesses are the most stubborn I have ever seen. I've had reasonable conversations with Catholics and even Protestants, but Jehovah's Witnesses apparently they never listen. Do you think
That's
there's
not true.
specific?
I get the frustration, but I mean, you can go talk to Lloyd and any of the people who've left and have dealt with Watchtower stuff. You're going to find incredibly stubborn people in any, and the most stubborn people amongst the most fundamentalist of them. So Southern Baptists and FLDS. So your FLDS folks are going to be more stubborn than just generic Mormons. Similarly, the Southern Baptists are going to be more generic than Presbyterian. It's just the way it is. The Episcopalian Church, the others that are gay friendly. I posted a TikTok just like 2 hours before we went live, where there were a bunch of like gay bashing Christians out there with their signs, and there was another one, someone ostensibly a Christian, holding up a sign that was pointing at them that just basically said, "Not all Christians are assholes like these idiots." And part of me just wants to go out and say, I agree. And I'm really glad that you're not one of the bad ones. But I did something else with the TikTok, which is I said, that's true. And yet they are pointing to the same unproven God that you point to and using the same immoral holy book that you point to. The difference is they're ignoring the voices that the verses that you prefer, and you're ignoring the verses that they prefer. And so while I'm glad you're a better person than them, you can spare me the hashtag not all Christians kind of defense, because you're all still supporting the same crap. It's just nitpicking about which bits of crap you're going to hold up and which ones they're going to hold up. But the TikTok was slightly better than I made it, I thought.
I'm going to check that TikTok. Well,
but cheers, Matt. I got to get on and take some super chats.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yep. My interactions with my mom may be a good one, which is I talk about it when she wants to, and the rest of the time I just say, "How you doing, Mom? What's going on?" That's it. And she's never going to change her mind, at least not from me. But
thanks.
Wish that guy all the best. Super nice dude.
Cheers. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Matt. All right, let's do let's knock out some super chats. I'm gonna have David let me know how many we got, but we'll do, I don't know, let's do like 10 and then take the last call for the day. So
sounds good.
Omega, you're gonna be last right after this next batch of super chats. $10 New Zealand from Citizen Gold. Perhaps the Onion should pivot to being a news site, but flag all their content with "this should be satire," or "how is this not satire?" I could appreciate that. I think it would still frustrate me, but I could definitely appreciate that. $10 from Richard Conrad. Do you have any tips for scrutinizing research papers? I'm going to assume this is for you because I don't. A buddy of mine sometimes sends me bad papers and it takes me forever to understand why. Knowing what to look for in the moment would help a lot. So yeah, if somebody's sending you research papers, what do you?
The order in which you read them is really important. So start with the introduction so you know what they're talking, or we'll start with the abstract first. If they have an abstract, a thesis statement, just like the breakdown, start there obviously because they're going to describe the whole paper. And sometimes they're really bad about that and they're very vague on purpose, but it should give you a breakdown of this is what we were testing and why, and this is what we found right there in the abstract. So start with that to see if it's worth your time to read. if you're supposed to be criticizing it, start then with the introduction, because the introduction gives you background on the problem, tells you what they're like, what's the history of this idea and why they're now starting to talk about it, and then just skip right to materials and methods and see what they did and how they did it and why that matters. And then you can go over to the results and whatnot. Now, if you're reading a research paper to learn, you're not going to do that same order. You're going to do the abstract and then straight to the conclusion, the results, the discussion, and all that. And then if you need more context, you go back and read the rest of it. That's how you can crank through research papers like crazy if you're doing a degree or if you're trying to put together a paper that you're working on or something like that. Just, what is this saying? Okay, this is something I want to read more about. What did they actually found out and why is that important? You know, that's all you need to know. But if you're scrutinizing them, still start with that abstract so you know what the paper's about. And, you know, then you can kind of dig into the introduction to learn a little bit of the history, but you really want to tear apart that Matt's and methods section to know, does it make sense that they got the conclusions that they did, given the kind of test that they did? Can I ask more questions? And a great way to end also is on the discussion section of any paper, because the discussion section is probably going to say, here's the things we left out. The next paper should do this. If anybody's going to build on this, here's how you do it. We didn't take these things into account. It will also help you poke holes in the research paper if those people are being academically honest. So that's how I would do it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I wonder if I don't know, because I don't sit around doing scientific research and engaging with papers from different sources and stuff. I'm wondering if there's a source that everybody should know about, because a lot of these things are like papers behind a paywall. And somebody will send me something. It's pretty rare that anybody bothers to send me anything, but sometimes somebody will send me something and it's like, oh, I click on it and I can see the abstract and absolutely nothing else. And I don't know.
And like, you can, a lot of the time, your public library will have open access to all peer-reviewed science journals. Also, get familiar, go online and look up what science journals are predatory, because there are plenty of them that, you know, you publish in and it gets peer reviewed and then they put it out there because they're super excited about the science, and then it's fucking bullshit that they then make it a paywall there as well, considering the fact that like there's several different layers there where they make lots and lots of money, but that's neither here nor there. But then there are other science journals where you pay a certain amount of money and they'll publish your shit. It doesn't matter what it is. And they have lots of good things in there. But then there was a time a little while ago, it was a couple of years back, where a group of researchers wrote a paper about the memory parasites from Rick and Morty, and the paper was titled "Interdimensional Memory Parasites Inhabiting Earth" or whatever, and it got published in like a few big journals because they paid a bunch of money to have it published. And so like you have to be careful of predatory journals as well. But like honestly, if you can figure out, like, check who's citing it is another big thing. If you're curious about the paper, if the paper is kind of spurious, you can check, usually if you find online the citations, who's citing this paper and what are they saying about it. Check for retractions. Check to see if the people who wrote the paper came along later on today, actually turns out this is bullshit. We checked again, didn't work out. It's like the people who share that one godforsaken research paper linking vaccines to autism. And literally every one of those people have come out and said, hey, turns out this is wrong. I don't want any part of this. I want my name removed from this paper. And it's very, very easy to find that. So if you cite that one paper, you're an asshole. It's, you know, so there's lots of ways to do that. But if you're just reading them, that's how I would do it.
We need to remind people a lot that as great as peer review is, and as essential as peer review is to what we're doing, there's plenty of things that get peer reviewed that are crap. Peer review is only as good as the peers.
But people get things wrong.
Thanks a lot, Richard. I hope that information helps. We're going to knock out a few more super chats and then we'll take one last.
I will also say, as far as that, just last thing there with peer review, I learned in grad school, if you want to get a paper published in a big, really like Nature, Science, a big journal, you either do two things. You either work really, really, really hard and show some really great research, or you just write a paper that says everybody else is wrong. And they'll put it out there because it encourages discussion, and that's all you have to do. I've cited several papers in my thesis that are just like, here's this person who says literally everything I'm doing isn't possible. Here's why it is.
So $20 for MB. Matt, how do you know when to dump a call besides being a slavery apologist? I have trouble in real life giving up on lost conversations with theists or just trolling. What are your boundaries? my boundaries are going to be different from a lot of others. I try to remember most of the time, you know, when you're asking me about dropping calls, I'm doing a show. And so it depends on how many people are on hold and what conversations the people on hold are wanting to do. There are plenty of times where there just aren't any other callers. And so you stick with that and you try to make the conversation work. The other one is I'm just doing a cost benefit analysis. Are we likely to make any progress? Is there another call in the queue that could make progress? That's what I'm doing every time on the shows. In real life, I don't have that many one-on-one conversations. I do debates, and I do debates in front of audiences, and I do them for the benefit of the audience. I'm not trying to necessarily change the mind of the person I'm debating, but there are people who seek me out to like, hey, I want to have a one-on-one conversation, and I'm like, nope, call the show, because if I'm going to put in the work to have that conversation, there better be an audience, because I'm not as confident. I'm more confident that people hearing it are going to benefit from it more than just the person I'm talking to. And so for you, just kind of being in those situations, one thing you can do is anytime a conversation is not going well, you can say, hey, let's stick a fork in this. I want to think about what you said. I'm going to take some notes and I'll get back to you, and then do it, because you should do what you say you're going to do. But thanks, MB. Hopefully that was helpful. 50 from Donuts. I am too busy. Hoy, Fergal, Burger, Manergal, Burgle. I hope you're all super good. We're doing great, Donuts. Much improved after my 5 days of coughing. Thank you so much for your generosity. I am sorry that you're busy. One of these days, we should just get to hang out. That would be good. We should have like a hangout. Like maybe we'll make a little miniature one-day convention of this, where it's like, you know, August 15th in Cincinnati, it's the hangout, and everybody can show up, and
I'd be all about it.
We'll have the Andrews on, and we'll have a whole thing where we just tell people they're wrong about abortion and Trump and everything else.
Yep.
Donut. $20 from Wizard of Frobaz. Until I see pro-lifers outside of clinics with ready-to-be-signed contracts binding them to support a woman through a pregnancy, pay for any postpartum issues, and immediately adopt a child, they can do a donkey. While I get the sentiment, that is a really, 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 really bad argument, a horrible argument, because the one thing is the people who are opposed to abortion, they're already doing a lot of things to help pregnant people who have unwanted pregnancies, and babies always get adopted. It's kids that are older that are abandoned and get in the system and all that other stuff. There is no shortage of people waiting to adopt a baby. And so if you run around telling the people who are opposed to abortion, well, are you going to adopt a baby? They're going to say yes, or they're going to say no, but we have a waiting list, 10 miles long of people who will do it. And it's, if you can't bluff like that. You can't be like, okay, well, until you agree to do this, supporting a pregnant person, we're just not going to bother talking to you. They're going to tell you, I'm absolutely, completely ready to. I have multiple organizations that exist solely to help pregnant people. It's a distraction, because at the end of the day, those crisis pregnancy centers and what they are actually doing doesn't change the fact that there are people who don't want to be pregnant, and we should have no legal justification to force them to remain pregnant.
There are things that are generally like controversial or contentious between the pro-life folks and everything. Talk about childcare, talk about free and reduced lunches, talk about mental health care for kids, talk about counseling, talk about there's a million things that actually do need to be addressed that, generally speaking, the fiscally conservative folks would be against. So if this kid's going to be born, make sure they have a happy life, make sure they have access to good education, access to food, make sure they have proper adequate housing, make sure they have a good job lining up. All of those things would be liberal ideas. So where are we right now?
$10 from Wizard of Furballs. That was a great answer, and I'll benefit from the insight. Thank you. I'm glad it was useful because I made those same mistakes, and it was my ex-wife who corrected me. And because I would, I was on a show, and people would be calling in, and I'm like, well, what are you going to do with all these unwanted babies now? You're gonna adopt them all? And Beth was real. Beth knows more about this issue. Like, I should have Beth on as a guest and just do an abortion episode. She's coming up to stay with us tomorrow because she's coming to Austin for a medical procedure. So she's spending the night here, and I'll talk to her and see if she has an interest in coming on to talk about abortion. But I think she's mostly done with the activism. She did what she needed to do in training me to have better answers. I know what I know about abortion because I was married to her. So, all right, one last one, and then we'll take the Omega's call. I lost count. David's probably done it right, and I'm probably adding one. But $10 from Mr. Monster. Have you seen the trailer to the movie What is a Woman, and what do you think about it? I've never heard of it. You heard of it?
It sounds familiar. Is one of those like Steven Crowder type guys who goes out and just says incendiary things to get the liberal folks to have a big reaction, and then they laugh at it. And like I remember seeing a YouTube commercial, and then right? he's probably I don't know. And I saw a video of this guy walking down. There was like a woman's march type situation, and they're like, "We're here for women's rights." He's like, "Well, what is a woman?" with this microphone. It's just the next silly buzzword question to try to trap people into what they think is a fatuous answer so that they can win the argument without actually having it. It's it's real cringy.
This is a kind of bullshit pseudo documentary that Matt Walsh put out that released on June 1st. I have not seen it. Literally, this is the first time hearing about it. Forrest, define woman?
Woman is just like the blanket general term that we use to describe people who identify as female. That's what a woman is. A woman. It's a self-identifying term. It's not a useful biological term. It's just what we call people. That's all. If you have to ask questions about it, don't. It's not worth your time. I don't know, man.
Forrest has a bunch of good answers, including that, science doesn't really give us any insight into gender, and even the scientific definitions of what we would call biological sex are not clear cut. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show,
these are meaningful. They're not.
And yet, at the end of the day,
I didn't want to go on a tirade about it, but I could talk about it for 30 minutes with you, man.
Yeah. And the thing is that there are decent soundbite answers that Matt Walsh and others just aren't going to accept. And so they want to pretend like the left is engaged in some kind of magical thinking. The number of things that we could ask Matt Walsh to try to define that he and nobody else could define would really shock his viewers. So I don't have
that's
thoughts.
The thing is, like, woman is a gender term, and gender is not a biological thing. We could say female, which is, that's describing biological sex, which also isn't binary, by the way. But then, it's kind of insulting to walk around and be like, all of these females here. That's typically seen as objectifying. So woman is just the gender term that we use. And like I said, it's not biologically significant because gender is not biologically significant. It's not a biological construct.
Yeah, I always like to ask the Matt Walshes and everything. Name a characteristic that is exclusive to women, and that all women have. Because you're not gonna find it anyway. Today's last call, Omega. Thanks for waiting. EM, is it Massachusetts? Are you way up north?
And yeah, Boston.
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Can you hear me?
How can we help or screw this up? As the case may be.
Okay. I appreciate you taking my call very much. I just understand I'm a bit nervous right now, but I have a couple of conclusions to make and some premises to back them up. So let me start by saying that I try not to speak in absolutes, and I recognize that there are exceptions to every rule. So going forward, I'm going to speak in general trends and probabilities. You feel me?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Hello? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So conclusion number one is that right-wing violence is exponentially worse than left-wing violence, and they are being incentivized to continue. Okay? Now, I'm going to start out with a study from the Anti-Defamation League that showed in the past 10 years that extremist-related killings, among those, 75% of them are right-wing shooters. Only 4% of them are liberal. The other 20 odd percent of them are Muslim extremists. Okay, so 75% of right-wingers versus 4% liberals. That is literally like more than 4 cubed. Like 4 cubed is 64%. Will be 64, and 75 is more than that, obviously. So they're.
Oh no!
Oh come on, this dude's been waiting forever.
This guy. Yeah. Okay. We're going to try and get him back. And Dave's going to do that. Let's do some more super chats while we do this. And if we don't get Omega back,
sure.
I think I have enough information where I can kind of address the question that was in the screening thing. And we'll see what happens there. $10 from Mr. Monster. No, we already did that. $10 from One-Eyed Heathen. I lost my job. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. What are you doing donating to me if you lost your job? I lost my job and I'm waiting for a new cell phone to arrive because my current one doesn't work. Can I get an encouraging Fergal Burgle Manergle Burgle? Yes. One-Eyed Heathen. Burgle Burgle Manergle Burgle. I hope that you are unemployed for a vanishingly small period of time and that your new cell phone comes in. Stop donating to me until you start getting a paycheck again. I mean, you may be independently wealthy, and it's a mistake. My apologies to the other people who might make money off of this show for telling people to not donate. But as soon as I hear someone say, "I lost my job, here's $10," I'm like, it's greatly appreciated. But yeah, take care of yourself. $20 from Sal Willis. Thank you both for being true allies of women, people of color, and LGBTQ plus people. We appreciate it. Need it more than you know. Thank you so much, Sal. It's nice to be appreciated. By the way, I will say this because we've talked about allyship many times. I can think I'm an ally to a particular group all I want. It is up to each individual to determine, hey, is this person an ally? Are they allied enough with me and my views? Are they allied enough with my community? And so I appreciate when people recognize it. But like any other person who's trying to do good, Forrest and I are going to screw up, and I'm going to screw up more than Forrest because I forget more than he does right now. It's shocking to me how much shit I forget on a daily basis. It annoys me. If I did a show last night on Atheist Edge with Jim and Tracy and Kelly, and we were talking about cancel culture and who got canceled and who didn't get canceled and what's really going on, and it's really about accountability and what jokes you can tell and what you can't tell. And I think for me, the most important thing is that if I genuinely see that someone is trying to do good and be good on human rights issues and things like that, if they stumble or screw up or get something wrong or whatever else, it's much easier for me to just be like, you know what? I did that same thing, or I know somebody did that same thing, and let's fix it and move on. I'm currently dealing with an issue that I'm not going to talk about in any detail, where somebody screwed up, like legitimately screwed up in a way that I think requires a public apology. And it hasn't happened. It may happen. It may not happen. They've been made aware of this. They're somewhat receptive to the notion that there was a screw up and something needs to be done about it, but they are also still defensive. And sometimes it just takes some time for people to settle down into the sewage water of, wow, I really screwed up and I really need to do this. If it's individuals you trust, then you give them the time and you try to work with them. And if it's not, then everybody, in my view, is absolutely justified in putting up a barrier saying that person might change and might be a part of something that we would consider an ally, but they're not right now. And it's kind of what Arden and I did with Richard Dawkins. we're not running around saying person X is a transphobe. We're saying person X has done something transphobic. Dawkins has said many things that are undeniably transphobic. I'm not trying to sum up the entirety of Richard's character. I know the man. I don't know him well. We're not great friends, but we've done events together. We've had conversations. I don't think there's a strong likelihood that he's going to be changing his mind on trans issues, but I'm happy for me or anyone else to have conversations with him in the hope that it might happen. And so I can easily say he has been and done things that are transphobic. He is not currently an ally. But that doesn't mean that he's some monumental piece of crap that needs to be just tossed off a cliff. I mean, that's reserved for people like Trump, who I didn't vote for. Let's see. I think we've got to make it back. I'm going to try it. Are you there?
Hello? Yep.
Hey, welcome back. Your call dropped. Continue.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had issues with my phone, but I think I should be okay now. So, getting back to what I was saying about right-wing violence versus left-wing, I'm going to run through a few premises, and if we agree on them, then I'll just move on to the next one. But if not, then we could delve a little deeper or what have you. So premise number one is moderate. I'm sorry.
Go for it. We're low on time, which is why I wanted to get on it.
Okay, so moderate conservatives do little to nothing to rein in extreme conservatives. Is that fair to say?
I agree with that.
I agree.
Okay. My second premise is extreme right-wingers believe that they are actively under attack physically and culturally by minorities. And part two of that is that Fox News promotes such propaganda. Can we agree?
I agree on both of those as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My next one is any extremist group that suffers little to no consequences for terrorism is more likely to commit more terrorism.
Definitely agree with that.
Okay.
So my only disagreement with that is a technical one, and that is that a group that doesn't face consequences for it may not continue with terrorism if they get what they were wanting. Like, there's no reason for them to continue engaging in terrorism if they win.
That's a fair point.
Fair enough.
But then,
absolutely,
I guess,
fair enough.
To lean into what Omega's saying, though, even if they get what they want this time, if they get what they want now, then they might be incentivized to do that again next time they want something else, though, right?
Yes, I agree.
Exactly.
And the only reason I jumped in on a technicality is because there's no way my brain won't do that if I'm actually in debate mode.
Okay, no problem. So my next premise is, as of yet, Democrats have done very little to discourage future violence by the right wing.
Agreed.
Sure.
Very little.
Okay.
I don't think they've done nothing, but very little.
Yeah. My next one is, if Trump loses another election, his followers will believe the election was stolen from them.
That's
I'm
likely.
not convinced. It's possible, but I'm not convinced that's a done deal.
Can we agree that Trump will promote it as being a stolen election?
I
likely
say that he will do that. I think that it's likely that he would.
Yeah, we can't predict the future, of course, but I'm like I said, I like to talk in probability, and I think it's more than likely that Trump will.
It would not surprise me in the least to find that happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, my last premise for this conclusion is most conservatives would still vote for a candidate that showed indifference to right-wing violence.
You said centrists would vote for this?
No, conservatives. They'll show indifference.
Oh, conservatives,
to a candidate. Yeah, conservatives will still vote for a candidate if that candidate showed indifference to right-wing violence.
Yeah, I think the statistics
That's been shown
back
to be
that
the
up.
case. So yeah,
the reason behind it, we may have some dickering to do, because, like, for example, I know plenty of people who are single issue voters. They're going to vote for the people who want to oppose abortion, period, irrespective of any other position. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the reason why I bring this up is because it's basically I'm basically trying to show that we're willing to like conservatives are willing to put into power people that promote these right-wing agendas of replacement theory and what have you, even if that person is, dangerous in that sense because of that one issue that they're voting on, like abortion or what have you. But the bottom line is these people are being put into power that have this radical extremist agenda and remateric.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
worse than that.
So
They're using something that's been termed a pedo jacket, where they constantly want to go after the people who disagree with them as if they're all pedophiles and pederasts promoting that sort of thing. Because if you do that, it makes it much easier to vilify them, which means it makes it much easier to other them, which means it makes it much easier to kill them when the Civil War starts.
It's real easy to do
Exactly.
a fascism if you tell everybody that everybody else is a pedophile.
Yep.
Exactly. They're kind of laying down a framework, it feels like, but I don't want to get into any kind of conspiracy theories or anything like that. But okay, I was going to move on to my next conclusion. My next conclusion is important too, is that we feed into right-wing narratives when we openly concede our own shortcomings and imperfections. And when I say we, I mean progressives.
I can see how it would be used that way, but I don't think that makes it a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's like,
absolutely. The same way as like it.
Well, that's my conclusion. Allow me to lay down my premises to support that conclusion, if you don't mind.
well, I have no problem with
Sure,
that being
go
a
for it.
conclusion. It's that you might as well say that reality or human decency bolsters their position. And this gets back to like, are we training the next set of shooters by having them participate in the drills? Yes, conceding our limitations does play into their straw man, and yet it would still be wrong for us to not concede our limitations.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's
Okay,
just like it's the same thing as like whenever we talk about the Second Amendment, and if someone says AR means assault rifle when it actually means Armalite rifle, then all of a sudden, well, you don't know anything about gun violence because you know this one thing was wrong, and now you're completely wrong about everything. It just that's what they're doing. Or the same thing when you talk to a theist and they're like, oh, you just don't understand God because XYZ thing, So it's an easy way for them to avoid having an argument, but it's still for the best that we be intellectually honest.
Okay,
It's like the
fair
science
enough.
thing we mentioned
Overall,
earlier.
what I'm
I promise I'm going to let you get to this, Omega. I just wanted to put a bow on it. It's like the science thing we talked about earlier. It is a strength of science that it changes its perspectives based on new information. Those people who are opposed to science can hold that up as if it's a flaw all they want, but they're wrong. And it would be a mistake for us to pretend like the flaw, like this isn't part of science in order to avoid having them call it a flaw. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Keep going.
What I'm trying to show with this conclusion to be expand on it a little bit is to show how we are losing our arguments against the right wing because of the way we argue against them. Now I'm going to give you these premises to illustrate that. Okay. So premise number one is that our audiences tend to be swayed by assertive, unflinching arguments over thoughtful, nuanced ones.
For sure. But that doesn't,
propaganda works.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I'm glad we agree on that. My second premise is when rules are not enforced, it benefits cheaters over those playing fair.
Yep.
Yeah, makes sense too.
Okay. Now, what I'm going to say here, this applies more to Democrats than liberals in general, but I think you'll get the gist of it. But when discussing societal problems, liberals tend to say we, as in we all need to do this. We have a problem here. We have an issue to discuss, whatever, or to fix. And conservatives, on the other hand, they say they, like, oh, those liberals are the problem, or those foreigners are the problem, or those blacks are the problem, or whatever. So from a moderate standpoint, when they hear liberals say we, meaning that liberals are taking some of the blame for what's happening, even if it's something that liberals have been fighting against forever, we're basically saying, okay, we take some of the responsibility and the other side takes some of the responsibility. But then when the conservatives talk, they say, no, we have no responsibility in this. You guys have all of the responsibility. So it hurts our argument by admitting, by taking on some of the responsibility of things that we've actually been fighting against this whole time. Because it allows moderates in the middle to say, well, the conservatives say it's all the liberals, and the liberals say it's partly the liberals. So I guess it's mostly the liberals.
Yeah.
You understand where I'm coming from?
This is the one I'm going to push back on the most.
Okay.
Because this is predicated on a notion that liberals say we and conservatives say they. I think a case can be made that
mainly
both
Democrats. I want to clarify. Mainly Democrats. Democrats are quick to say we, and then Republicans are quick to say, no, they're the problem. You know.
I'll push back on that as well.
But I mean mainly as a leader. Okay, go ahead.
I'll push back on that as well. Whether you want to divide it up, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, however you want to divide it up, I think it is a perspective bias that has that gets you to that conclusion. I think you could say conservatives say we when it's convenient for them, and they when that's convenient for them, and the Democrats say we and they, depending on which one's convenient. If you want to talk, if it's more conducive to your message to show that the other side has done bad thing X, then you talk about they. And if it's more conducive to show what we've done that's good, it's a we. So there's this bias there either way. I don't think I'm not so much a progressive liberal Democrat fan that I'm willing to pretend that Democrats aren't doing a lot of really stupid they messaging as well. I mean, you could put together a clip where maybe all I've talked about is, it's like the person in chat earlier who was saying, oh, so this is all Trump and Putin's fault. I've never said or hinted or suggested that everything that's wrong is Trump and Putin's fault. But when I talk about Trump, he's the least honest, least intelligent, least respective, least diplomatic, blah, 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 blah. And that gives the impression. But I'm still talking about they. I'm not talking about Democrats. I haven't come on my show to talk about what Democrats have fucked up or what Democrats have done good. So that's the only extent I would push back on that one premise there.
I believe it's important.
I have no data to say.
Yeah, sorry.
I have no data to say for sure which side uses what words differently, but I will say that, like, when you're talking just about the rhetoric there, when you use words like they, that is deliberately othering people. That is deliberately drawing these lines. We say words like we, it's supposed to be more inclusive. And that's an important distinction because we see there's innumerable studies in social psychology, studies in intergroup discrimination, studies into tribalism, these things, that tribal lines are very easy to draw and redraw whenever we want. We decide who's in the in-group and who's in the out-group at a moment's notice. And the second somebody's in the out-group, we will vilify them, we will distrust them, we will hate them, we will go out of our way to screw them over, even if it screws us over too, because we expect that they're going to do the same thing to us, even if we have no evidence for that. That's just how humans behave. And when we have an in-group, we will defend them vehemently, even if they screw up and don't deserve our kindness. We will make sure that we take care of our own. It's just what humans do. And so, again, I have no idea which side is using what language, but I can say for sure that the inclusive language of we need to make this better is deliberate, and the exclusive language of they are hurting us, they are the problem, is deliberate, and it's there to scapegoat, to make it, if we have a problem, it's not my fault, it's their evil, this terrible evil person's fault, blame them. And if we have a solution that we're working for, all of us as a community can work together and make this, and it's all of our victory. So yeah, this is
I agree.
Old
I agree with what I agree what you're saying. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there in terms of the way people, work it out in their own minds about like what the truth is or what have you. But let me use a specific topic as an example. When it comes to divisiveness in politics and in America and whatnot, you'll have a moderate or liberal. No, let's say a moderate because for the sake of argument, they'll say, oh yeah, we need to. There's so much divisiveness in politics, and the liberals are divisive, the conservatives are divisive. The problem is conservatives. They talk about freedom, how they love freedom and everything, but they never fought for the freedom of anybody. They never supported the freedom of anybody except for themselves. any other group in America that's ever said we are being discriminated against and we want to be free in the land of the free, conservatives have always been the ones fighting against them. And liberals were the ones fighting on their side. So when liberals talk, and the in-group of liberals is essentially every race, every culture, and what have you, I guess, except for the right wing. You know, you could say, you can put it that way or whatever. But the right wing, on the other hand, they only care about their white, Christian, Anglo-Saxon or whatever group, and everyone else are the others. So when it comes to
I know that you know you're doing this, but just to I know that you know you're doing this, but just to be very clear and make sure the audience understands well, you are painting with very broad brushes and you are lumping in several different political philosophies from both sides into just the terms liberal and conservative, right? You're doing this on purpose for simplification.
Absolutely. I'm just generalizing right now.
I just want to make sure, because I know for sure there's going to be somebody watching this and say, see, they say all liberals do X, Y, Z when it is, and that's just to make sure that's out there. This is intentional for the point of simplification.
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's absolutely true. I'm using a broad brush. I'm talking in generalities and like general trends. Okay. So generally speaking, liberals tend to be the ones that support the freedom of all people, and conservatives tend to be the ones that squash the freedom of most other people. Okay. Now, as a matter of fact, like example I love to give is how conservatives used to make fun of liberals 50 years ago by calling them N-word lovers. Because liberals wanted to treat black people fairly with equality, so they're N-word lovers. It's funny how love is a pejorative in the conservative lexicon. They hate interracial love. They hate LGBTQ love and whatnot. They use love as being almost a bad thing, and for some reason moderates don't recognize that as a negative sign on the side of conservatives. But getting back to my main point. Liberals, generally speaking, are about uniting as many people as possible. They don't see an other out there other than the people that are speaking against uniting all people.
Right. It is tough because when you have that conversation, you are othering people. So like it's hard to avoid that. And at this point, I have no qualms with saying that that I'm on the intolerant left. I'm so far left that you get the guns back, and I'm saying that, like, hey, if you are actively fighting against basic human rights, you are the problem. I'm cool with that. But because you are speaking in such broad terms, which I understand is necessary, I'm not faulting you for that. Because you are speaking in such broad terms, and because we are summarizing hundreds of years of history here into just they did this and we did that, there's a huge amount of context there that for someone listening in is going to be lost. And they're just going to say, all right, well, now I'm the other. And you're saying, well, everybody who thinks like me is a bad person, but I'm not a bad person. And I have these nuanced beliefs. And like, yeah, the history of America is slowly arguing over who it is and is not okay to discriminate against. And that fucking sucks. And yeah, clearly we've been on this trajectory of getting it a little bit more right as we go along. It's just, it's worth repeating over and over and over just how complex and nuanced that is.
We're going to end up running way over.
I'm so glad you said that.
Hang on. We're going to end up running way over. And while you have done better, Omega, than maybe any caller I've ever had at saying, here's a premise, do you agree? Here's a premise, do you agree? Blah, 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 blah. We have now moved down into generalities that I don't think I'm going to continue agreeing with, and I don't think are actually getting us towards something helpful. So if we can put a bow on this and get to whatever conclusion you're wanting to do, we can kind of stick a pin in it, finish up some super chats, and get on.
Well, what I'm saying is that if we're trying to sway moderates to our side, because I'm sure you already agree that moderates tend to sway elections. They tend to be deciding votes in elections. We need to come up with a rhetoric that is not so easily undermined by the right wing. When we're quick to say we this and we that, and the right wing is quick to just point the finger at us, it makes it easier for moderates who want to go right down the middle, who claim to want to go right down the middle, to lean towards the right wing, because the right wing are assertive in their innocence and our guilt, as opposed to us, where we're a little, at least more likely to take a little bit of the responsibility of making things better.
Okay. Like
right.
I predicted, we're now at the point where I disagree. So this contrast between liberals and conservatives is really about change. Conservatives don't want things to change. Liberals are okay changing things. But
yeah,
with regard to the strategy moving forward, I don't think it's about, and I know you didn't necessarily mean this. This is only my pedantic brain going with what you actually said. This shouldn't be about rhetoric, and it shouldn't be about marketing. It should be, if we're gonna convince moderates to join the progressives, we need to get the moderates to understand about the type of propaganda and dishonesty that the conservatives or the right are using. Because if the right isn't being honest in addressing the left, and in some cases they are, because in many cases the left is kind of fucked up. But if the right isn't being honest in addressing it, then to me the right course of action will always be educating people on how it's not right. It'll never be, let's come up with better propaganda and rhetoric. Because, it's one of the things where, like, I've joked along with this, which is, hey, our side's playing by the rules and we're getting screwed because the other side doesn't have to play by the rules. We can, we're not going to, we don't want to mess up with the filibuster. Fuck that. You've already lost the Supreme Court. Liberal, Democratic, progressives lost the Supreme Court. And it wasn't because they were dishonest, and it wasn't because they didn't have good shtick to feed to the moderates. It's because they failed to convince the moderates that the propaganda coming from the right was actually wrong and fallacious and, led to a worse world. And yeah, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's why we'll be stuck treading water for so long. But while I'm in agreement with you on the rest of it, we get to the point where it's, hey, we need to come up with better rhetoric to convince the moderates. I would argue that to whatever extent it is rhetoric, what we should be working on is teaching the moderates, hey, here's what propaganda is. Here's the problem with it. Here's why what the right's saying isn't accurate. Here's why earlier in the show, when I made a list of here were my objections to Trump, when my right-wing interlocutor comes back with, yeah, but Biden did this in the first year and a half in office. What Biden did in office, even if he came in and slaughtered half the planet, has no bearing on whether or not what I said about what Trump did and why I didn't vote for Trump was accurate. This is the problem.
Absolutely.
This is the thinking that the caller got wrong, which is like, yes, I am going to show you wrong, when he didn't even know what the damn list was. And he started off by saying, here's what Biden did after getting office. Exactly. Point to where I said I was happy with everything Biden did after he took office. Point to where, if you just said, if you knew what Biden was going to do in the first year and a half of office, would you still have voted for him? Because my answer is going to be yes, because of all the things I said about Trump were still true. But I appreciate the call. We got to wrap up.
But
and so
it's the same thing with it.
Real quick, just want to say, because it's much quicker to say a lie than it is to dispel that lie. And the problem is most people can't think logically. So in order to get the people in the middle, the moderates, to come to our side without rearranging our rhetoric, we would have to teach them how to think logically and how to recognize logical fallacies and whatnot. But that takes a long time to learn also. So because we don't have time to sit here and give them a logical plot. I'm sorry?
It's taken 17 plus years for me to keep doing it.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, it takes longer for us to teach them how to think logically than it does for us to rearrange our own rhetoric to sway them to our side in a way that they are receptive to.
I get it.
It could also just be as simple as addressing the fact that like centrism and being a moderate is also part of the problem. This rhetoric of, well, there's bad people on both sides, therefore it really doesn't matter. That is part of the problem. And I think a big part of that is teaching where American politics actually lie on the political spectrum. We like to pretend that we have these, pretty right-wing people, and then we have the radical left, when the truth is the most extreme radical leftist politicians that we have here in America are like barely left of center for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so we have extreme radical right wing and left is what we actually have here in America. And the left is treated as if it's this fucking crazy thing. So people like me who are actually on the radical real left, the are very much on that side. I think people like me have to do a better job saying, hey, you in the middle are actually quite right wing. And if you want to talk about this, you know, I forgot who said it first, but if you live to the north in a town to the north and there's two buses, one of them is going northwest, but it's kind of in the direction, but it's not quite where you want to go, and the other bus is driving off a cliff, you can't say, well, both buses are bad, so I guess it doesn't matter. You just take the one that's at least going in the right direction. So the most extreme left wing here in America is at least more humanitarian, more equality, you know, more reason than, you know, the extreme fascist right that we have on the other side.
Yes. Matt, real quick, do you mind if I promote my website?
Well, go for it.
Okay. I have a website called proaggressive.com. Okay. And it's all about like t-shirts and signs and whatnot to change the way that we are, our rhetoric in terms of how we promote our causes and how we denounce the causes of the right wing. You can, it's called proaggressive.com. Right now I have a different collections. One of the collections is called LGBTQ, and I use that acronym as meaning let's get back to questioning. Let's get back to questioning sex. Let's get back to questioning gender. Let's get back to questioning, what happens, along that line.
Damn it. No, we got to stop.
Sorry?
We got to stop. I tried. I want to be promotive, but if you're just going to co-opt LGBTQ and change what it means for convenience.
No. I'm not trying to co-opt it. No, I'm not trying to co-opt it at all. I'm sorry if it came off that way. I'm sorry if it came off that way. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. I mean, and I would love any kind of advice when as far as that's concerned, if I'm going in the wrong direction, because that's not what I'm trying to do.
I get it, but I'm just saying we promoted the website. I got to get to Super Chats, and I'm not going to get into a big discussion about let's rebrand LGBTQ.
Okay, no problem.
But I got to move on. But thank you so much, Mega.
No problem. All right, thank you for.
All right,
see you later, Mega.
David. Let's get our Super Chats done. There's a TikTok trend right now where it's are you pro LGBTQ, and it's like, you mean lettuce, bacon, guacamole, taco, quesadillas? Yes. Mm-hmm. Or, and some of them are occasionally amusing, but the purpose behind this attempt to rebrand is to give the people who are not pro LGBTQ something to laugh at. In the same way that somebody asked me about Ricky Gervais' special, which I have not seen, but I heard the specific jokes that were transphobic, and they were transphobic despite what Ricky may think. And the issue here is, if you joke about trans folks and it's the anti-trans folks who are laughing the hardest, you fucked up.
Yeah.
$10. Captain V. Thoughts on rejecting therapists solely because they believe in a higher power? I have issues trusting one who does. I reached out to STP, but I live in Germany. I haven't heard back. Oh, the Secular Therapy Project. Yeah, I would reject therapists, not so much because they happen to believe in a higher power, but if it was relevant and used within their therapy. Like, there are, believe it or not, God believers who will use science-based therapeutic methods and never let their religion come into a session. So yeah, if I don't know that they're religious, I guess I don't have any justification to say I'm not.
Maybe don't have a religious therapist if you are in therapy for religious trauma. Because if I was to go in there and talk about, like, hey, this is this horrible thing that was taught to me, and they're like, well, you don't understand God, I'd flip a table. That'd be a problem.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Captain V. And hopefully the the Secular Therapy Project, will have more options in Germany. I know they're branching out around the world. I'll get Daryl Ray back on here again soon. $10 in ZQs. I learned about some of the fish last year in Finding Nemo, clown and anglerfish in particular. It blew my mind.
They're freaking crazy, dude. They're awesome.
I love them.
Clownfish are all female clownfish are trans. They're all born male, and then if there's not a dominant, there's like one dominant male and one dominant female in the school. And if the dominant female isn't there, if there's no female around when they reproduce, one of the males will turn female to allow them to continue on the population. It's crazy cool, dude.
Yeah, there's so much stuff. I mean, oh, by the way, did you hear that David Attenborough got a second knighthood?
Of course he did, and he fucking
I don't
deserves
know how many
as
people
weird
have
and as stupid as knighthoods are.
But I saw him sitting
But he
there
had
with
two
his
shoulders, so I mean,
yeah. I mean, he's the baddest, probably one of the baddest naturalists I could ever imagine. I'm so glad that I was alive at the same time he was. I wish he's one of probably 5 people who, if somebody said, pick 5 people that you want to go meet before they're gone, David Attenborough would be very near the top of my list.
Sir David Attenborough.
Sir David Attenborough. Congratulations again, Sir
Squared.
Not quite to that limit, but could be. 1999 from Nicholas. Forrest, thank you for your kind understanding and patience and compassionate explanations and your passion for teaching. You're one of my favorite hosts. Matt, you are a touchstone. Thanks. Sweet.
Well, thank you.
Somebody else called me out for something, and I took it as a compliment, even though it wasn't intended to be a compliment, I don't think, but I'm going to keep it that way. $20 from Wonder. Do you think most mass shootings are done by the severely mentally ill? It seems when this is the case, the media attention is extensive, but when it's not, they don't seem to go into much detail on why the shooter did it. I think that a case could be made that anyone who picks up a weapon and slaughters 20 individuals probably has something atypical about their neurology. Whether or not it's a chemical issue, whether it's a psychological issue, whether it counts as a mental health issue, I don't know. And honestly, I don't care, because until we're doing something, there are plenty of countries where they have mental health issues that rival our own. They're not having this issue. So there's still something about the United States that goes beyond mental health. We should be working to destigmatize mental health issues entirely, have universal health care that covers and encourages people to seek treatment for issues and depression, victims of bullying and all these other things. It's one of the reasons why of all the things, the changes I think we could make, it's changed the legal age to get a gun to 21, because a good chunk of these are 18 and unders who have never been out in the real world and think that what happened at school that legitimately traumatized them, bullying, whatever, somebody didn't return their affections, whatever. You have to remember that younger kids, this is the end of the world. Oh my God, nothing will ever be right again. And, while there may be, I think I would bet that a good chunk of the people who have committed these mass shootings might not be as severely mentally ill as a lot of people might suspect, and that this could be, there are people who, when they come up against the wall, might, and I apologize for content warning for self-harm, might be suicidal, and there's others who might become homicidal. And I would like to think that if we work to change both their access to weapons and their access to compassion, therapy, healthcare, we could do a lot to stop this. But I get really irritated as soon as people are like, it's not a gun problem, it's a mental health problem. No, it's not. Not in that.
That's the thing. There are actually activists. There's one that I remember seeing just very recently on, I think it was on Now This, that they were talking about him. A young man who almost was a school shooter. He backed out of it at the last minute and decided not to go through with it. And he talks about what brought him to that point. And what he describes are the same kind of loneliness and depression and feeling of being outcast and everything that lots and lots of kids go through. He had it in a more extreme case, of course. It's not, his feelings aren't invalidated because of that. But what puts somebody there is not unique to America. We are not the only country with bullies. We are not the only country with depression. We are not the only country where teenagers are dramatic. We are not the only country with violent video games. We are not the only country with pornography. We are not the only country with fucking doors in our school. It's the guns. We have guns. We have more guns. It's the guns. The guns are the problem. The problem is the guns. We have the guns. The guns are the issue. Every other country has every other part of this. Every other country has solved this problem in some way or another to varying degrees of success. Some better, some worse, some nice, some not so nice. There's lots of different solutions that are out there. This is a problem so complicated that only America can't figure it out. And it's, oh my God, it's weird, dude. It's weird that we can't just say it's the fucking guns, yo. It's the guns.
If you look back, I'm here in Austin. I'm 15 minutes away from the University of Texas Tower, where Charles Whitman, when at the age of 25, went on a shooting spree and killed 14 people, and injured 31 others. He had been begging for help and begged them, knew there was something wrong with him, and begged for an autopsy, and they found a tumor in the white matter around his amygdala upon autopsying his body. This is generally viewed as the cause. You know, this put his brain in a state to do this. That's not, I mean, that's an actual physical brain condition, not mental illness, not something that's going to be in the DSM. This is a tumor that's pressing on something and is causing or contributing to these feelings that led to this. No mental health screening would have necessarily fixed this on their own, although they might have been able to detect it, because it's a tumor. And if he hadn't been so diligent about saying, there's something wrong with me, please check after I'm dead, we might not have ever known. And people might have just written it off as, well, here's another crazy person shooting people up. We need to do better across the board. We need to take away, I was going to say we need to take away the guns. We do need to take away the guns. We need to regulate our weapons much better, but we definitely have to care for the people. And we got to do a lot to change our schools, because bullying is huge, and it doesn't just lead to school shootings. It's the reason that kids kill themselves. It's the reasons they kill each other. It is the reason why they become ostracized from the rest of society and sometimes turn into the adults that nobody wants to be around. Oh, well, maybe it's due to this mental health issue, or maybe it's due to that. I'm not going to sit here and speculate as to what percentage is X type of mental illness. We have to do better across the board, but we got to fix the guns.
Yeah. There are a lot of issues, but you cannot deny that guns are a big part of it.
You guys ask great questions.
It's also really funny whenever, there's a shooting and someone says, oh, well, see, this is why we need, it's a mental health issue. Okay, cool. So you support expanding mental health care and making it free and affordable, right? Well, of course not. That's socialism. Yeah, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not actually help anybody. God forbid.
No. Well, let's explain what the problem is and why it isn't guns.
Yep. Thanks, Wonder. $10 Canadian from Kathleen Moncrief. This is the first time I've watched the show live, so I want to say thank you for all you do in real time. Awesome. Well, it wasn't
thank you so
quite
much.
Real time, because you sent that a while ago, and we just now got to it, but I greatly appreciate it. 1999 from John Kennel. Woo pro tip. Gargling the urine of a righteous goat on the full moon will not cure your chronic bad breath. Trust me. I'm afraid I can't trust you, because that's an assertion where you haven't presented the actual evidence to back it up. I suspect that you're probably
that does
correct.
Explain a lot.
I suspect that you're correct. And by the way, I have no interest and no reason to go around gargling urine from anybody, goat or otherwise. So thanks, John. $10 from Empress Lizard. Just some love for two of my favorite personalities. Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
I tell you, Forrest and I haven't known each other all that long, but you guys know me. I like to get my friends on the show, and I like to get good people with good ideas and stuff on the show. I'm really thrilled that it doesn't surprise me at all that you've all received him as the awesome individual he is, but it's been across the board. The feedback, by the way, that we got from Atheist Experience, both when you and I did it and when you and Shannon did it, is incredible. And so we're always really glad that Forrest is so generous with his time, because I don't have any expertise in the science areas that he does. And it's really awesome to have somebody who's like, no, actually, and boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden people just sit back and go, oh yeah, this is what there are people with actual expertise. Not everybody's just talking out of their ass the way Matt does.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me.
Thank you, Empress Lizard. $10 from Sticks Mommy. I was able to catch a few minutes earlier and a little now. We'll have to go back and watch later. I always enjoy the show, but never get the chance to view it live. Well, we're glad that you get to watch it at all. And hopefully hopefully when you go back and watch it, you will find something useful. $19.99 for Stephanie Helms, because I feel the love. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie's one of the people who actually knows something I was vague talking about. But we're just going to keep working towards good stuff. So thanks a ton, Stephanie. Appreciate it. $10 from Lighthouse Yen. I'm really enjoying the Forrest and Matt team up. Forrest enthusiasm is infectious, and Matt teaches me something new every time I tune in. Thank you. You guys are way too sweet. Like, I try to be nice on the show, but every now and then I'm going to get a little prickish, especially, like if we're having a good conversation with someone who agrees with me and then tries to disagree immediately afterwards. You guys are just way too fucking nice. I'm waiting for Forrest to go off on somebody and say something mean someday, so that I want, when we do the episode where I end up looking like the nice guy. Okay. Yeah. Then there'll be something.
There are a few things he'll send me there. We're waiting for it.
I watched you once on a show that I wasn't on, and you went on a tirade, and I was like, yeah, I can do a show with this guy. I was like, that's way farther than I would have gone on this one. So good job.
Do you remember what it was? I want to look that up.
No, but Arden might.
Of course not.
Because I leaned over and I was like, damn, he went way farther than I would have on that. She's like, yeah, he's a little badass. I get spicy.
Oh,
love the spice. Thanks, Lighthouseon. All right. $9.99 from Jeff Salerno. Speaking of a cost-benefit analysis, if I were to continually donate $10 for long-winded super chats, could I make this hang-up episode last forever? I love the show. Technically, you could. Yeah, if you just did $10, $10. I would continue to sit here and read them until I physically couldn't. And then what we would do is we would let me rest, and then we would start the next show by continuing to read each one of those. So technically you could, I would take a nap and come back. But you don't have to, and we appreciate the support that you.
Of course, we stream the whole nap, so you get to stare at that as well.
Matt gets to go to bed, but we're just going to point the camera at the bed. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
$10 from Jeremiah Bach. I struggle because if the fetus at some point is a person, then it has rights. Killing a baby denies them all the rights. Surely this is even more wrong than denying women the right to choose. No, it's not.
No.
And abortion is not the right to kill. Abortion is the right to terminate a pregnancy. Terminating a non-viable pregnancy results in the death of the fetus, and that is a consequence of nature. Terminating a viable pregnancy results in basically a delivery, a C-section, those types of things. Abortion is not codified as the right to kill. And so at what point, and this is a semi-rhetorical question for you to think about, Jeremiah, if you think that it's more wrong to deny a woman a right to choose than it is to say, to allow them to choose to terminate a pregnancy just because the fetus dies, what do you do when the pregnant person dies? Because you forced them to remain pregnant. At the end of the day, though, while you can look at it as unfortunate, the truth is fetuses have incredibly limited rights, but what anti-abortion advocates are trying to do is give fetuses more rights than any other person on the planet, because they're granting them special rights to somebody else's body. If I come in and kidnap someone and hook them up to a blood filtering machine in order to keep me alive, is it more wrong for them to disconnect from me than it is to force them to stay connected? I get it. The anti-abortion folks have done such a good job of creating propaganda that hits your emotions that most people just skip right over the fact that no, in fact, it isn't more wrong to allow someone to say, I'm not going to allow my body to be used this way. It's just not.
No.
I would say it's not wrong at all, but it's definitely not in the more wrong category. $10 from Funky Square. Forrest, have you seen Professor Day's videos on trans issues? He says gender is biological, gender roles for social constructs. Do you have a take?
I have not seen his video. I haven't watched a lot of Professor Dave stuff. I have nothing against him. I just haven't had the opportunity to watch his stuff. I know he's well liked. From what I understand, we have similar educational backgrounds, is like, or several levels or whatever. I don't know. So I don't know. He seems like a really nice guy. I don't know what he says in that video. If what you're saying here is accurate, assuming that gender is biological and gender roles are social construct, it sounds like he's just using different wording, because the way that I have been taught and the way that it says in all of my textbooks, which many of them are here on this bottom shelf behind me, is that sex is biological, gender is a social construct. Gender is an individual's reflection and representation of their and their society's expectations of someone of their biological sex. So biological sex comes down to all sorts of things. You can classify it with gamete size, with, sometimes people do it with chromosomes, sometimes you do it with hormone levels, sometimes you do it with genitalia. You can do all these different things to figure out what biological sex is. The actual definition is gamete size, but you don't always use that, especially when talking about humans. And so those are all biological structures, not one of which is a binary. Gender is a social construct. It's something that varies from society to society, from society to society, from person to person, from generation to generation, even from day to day. So it sounds like he's hitting the same notes, but just using different language, which I would argue is incorrect language, but who knows? Maybe he has maybe these things are kind of silly words anyway, and we should just move on with it. So I have not
maybe
seen that
he's
video.
using the language we'll all end up using at some point, but at this point,
eventually. And in all fairness, even in my, like, I released a video on my channel like a year or so ago, and it was like one of the first videos that I ever released on my channel, and so I hate it. And in that video, I was inconsistent in my language. And I go back and there's parts on there where, like, I know I was trying to make sure that this sounded fatuous, but at the end, it just sounds like I fucked up my wording. And so, like, at one point I make that distinction. I explain that sex and gender are different. And then another point I use the word gender where I really meant sex. And, like, so maybe it was just a situation of that. Maybe he was just careless with his wording. Who knows? Because I've done that too. Everybody's done that. So I haven't seen this video. I hear it's interesting. I don't know.
I'm going to get Jangles on at some point to talk about transport stuff as well. We communicated briefly, but so that's going to happen. Thanks, Funky Swerve. I have not seen Professor Day's videos, so.
No, hey.
And YouTuber Professor Dave has posted a video on transgender saying that gender is a biological construct and that gender roles are social constructs. I don't want to be confused as you're wrong. Yeah, we just addressed that. I will say that maybe the takeaway is this. A lot of people are using slightly different language to say the same thing, which is that gender is a social construct, sex is a biological construct. But the truth is neither of those are completely accurate. And it doesn't matter if you say gender is biological and gender roles are societal. Okay, now we're talking about the language that you're using. The concepts that they're pointing to
are the exact same.
Is still wind up with us saying, you're cis or you're not.
Yeah. Just in summary, just if I can speak, again, I don't know what Professor Dave said, but just for everybody to be on the same page, sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender expression, pronoun usage, all of these things that are currently contentious politically for absolutely no reason, all of those things, not a single one is a binary. They're all wiggly, weird terms. Not a single one of them is well defined. Not a single one of them has set parameters that are universal. Most of them are completely arbitrary. Just let people be. People are what people are. It's cool. As biologists, nature's doing whatever nature's doing. And as biologists, our job is to try to take that and to cram it into boxes to make it make sense. And that absolutely never works. We talked about it at the very beginning. To learn biology, you categorize things. To understand biology, you quit doing that. Get out of dualisms. Dualisms are not good, especially when you're studying bioanthropology.
We got a couple more, and I don't know. I think we're coming close to setting a record for longest show, which is odd since I prepped nothing and we just took a half dozen calls. But here we go.
You started by saying like we're going to get through this fast.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. 999 from We All Want Mark Hamill to voice Ganondorf. Matt, you're amazing. Been playing the Arkham games. Love the Batman lore. Awesome. I have not been playing those, but I'm glad you're enjoying them. I played a little bit of E-Rising. I haven't played much lately because I've been busy with other stuff, but that's my newest kind of, hey, this is cool. And I tweeted out how absolutely awful Diablo Immortal is, and how I hope it bankrupts Blizzard for making a decision like this, where in order to max out your one character would cost over $100,000 for their free game with its just vile pay to win shit. $10 for Kurt Weinstein. That's an easy one. Is that the last one? Another one. Here we go. $10 from Ron Escara. Great to see you doing well, Matt. Thanks for all you do. Love the show. Love all the Fergal burglars out there. Thank you so much, Ron, and everybody else who contributed. As a reminder, this is one of the shows that I do that's a for-profit show, whereas when I work with the Atheist Community of Austin on atheist experience and stuff like that, we're all volunteers there. There are paid employees for production, but everybody who you see on camera for all those shows are all volunteers. I'm not a volunteer here. This is my job. And I love showing up, whether people are going to donate financially or not. I like the contributions. I love the fact that someone who's been participating for a long time called in and turned out to be one of the best presenters of, here's what I'm thinking, here's why, here's a premise. Do you agree? Do you agree? Do you agree? That was smooth as butter across the board. And then other people, well, it's not quite as smooth. If everybody put that much thought into things and was that careful about it, we'd have a lot less conflict, I think, in the world. Huge thank you to the people who do volunteer, though. Our moderators, I've watched them out there clicking, and this community is so good. Don't forget to click like so that maybe we can get to 666 likes. And David, as always, has my admiration and respect for doing all this. And Forrest, yeah, I'm sure we're going to do a gazillion D1 shows together over the coming years, assuming I don't have, like more heart problems. But thanks for coming in to hang out. It's always.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's always great to be here. I'd like to thank this fly that's been keeping me on my toes this whole time. Unwelcome guest, but he's here. Make sure
somebody in
the credits.
Dillahunty is a massive woke trans fluffer. Thank you. That's very kind.
Oh, there you go.
I greatly appreciate that.
Define woke.
Yeah.
What does
to put a bow
mean?
on this thing that came up? I wrote up a list when somebody's like, hey, why did you vote for Biden instead of Trump? I gave all those reasons. But the truth is, I could have answered it with one sentence. And I would be quoting my ex-wife. Why did I vote for Trump? Or why did I vote for Biden instead of Trump? The goddamn motherfucking Supreme Court. And if people had done that in 2016, we would not be in the position we're in now with respect to the Supreme Court. Now, if the people who did vote for Trump, if they're getting the Supreme Court they want, they can look at me all day long and say, hey, he voted with his heart instead of his head. I'd argue that I voted with both of them, and that what's happened to the Supreme Court and the other courts, stacking them with conservative justices, is a smart tactic from the right. It has been their mission for 50 years, and it's coming to fruition. And the issue now becomes, is there a way to counter this? Absent a civil war, absent a revolution, is there a way to fix this? I don't know. I hope there is. But if somebody wants to try to shame me for not wanting a Supreme Court that turns out like this, a Supreme Court that undoes people's rights, that
After they all
supports
said in
corporations.
their testimonies that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, this is settled precedent. If that's it, then we disagree in principle on what's better for America. But if the worst you can say is that I voted with my heart, thank you. I greatly appreciate your support. I wish
kind.
you would vote with my heart as well. On that note, we will see you all next week. Don't forget the Transatlantic Call-In show is tomorrow and this Sunday. Who's on the Sunday show this weekend? To be determined, which I hear is
Great
like
guy.
that's like Forrest Depeche Mode cover band name. To be determined. On that note, we will see you all. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the great questions, great discussion. Thank you, Forrest. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.